Good morning, viewers. Thank you very much. Welcome to Punchline Africa Television, broadcasting all the way from the Political Command Center in Africa, headquarters, live. This is Dr. David Matsanga, broadcasting live from Africa and broadcasting across the globe and across the continent of Africa. This is our business. Africa is our business. We are for Africa, by Africa, with Africa. We shall be broadcasting every Tuesday in the morning at 11 o'clock, Matsanga Africa Perspective, to look at the perspective of what ails Africa, what kills Africa, what makes Africa to be called different names, yet we are the vanguard of the revolutions, the vanguard of civilization, the vanguard of every economic activity that the world needs. The world wants us. Why have we been left behind? Why have we not been part and parcel of the United Nations, for example? Africa has been crying to be a member of the United Nations permanent since the end of the Second World War. How many Africans were involved in the fight against any other German, Hitler and others? Very many died. But what price have we paid, and what are the goals? What have we achieved from being members of the United Nations Security Council? Every week, every year, 77 years, the United Nations General Assembly has always been in, and it is always held in New York. What do we get out of this? What is it that we benefit as Africans? We have lots of peacekeeping forces heaped on the continent of Africa. Everywhere you go, from Central African Republic, from Libya, from Somalia, from DRC Congo, you have peacekeeping forces that have come and heaped themselves on the continent of Africa. What has happened? What has gone wrong? What is it that we are the only people where United Nations prescribes peacekeeping missions? Why? From Maputo, Mozambique, from every corner of Africa, from West Africa, Sahel, in Nigeria, all the forces seem to be gearing towards peacekeeping forces. And the UN sends us these peacekeepers. But what is it that we want as Africans? Why is it that we as Africans have not demanded that we need a permanent seat? Why is it that there are people on the permanent United Nations Security Council who can veto and say, no, even if I have attacked you, I'm not going to ICC? Why is it that it is us who are thrown to the ICC, recommended to go to the ICC, to the tribunal? This morning, these are the issues that we want as Africans, as our heads of state and the government fly into New York. Is it a holiday? Is it tourism? We take more money to American economy, yet we are poor. We come out with nothing. They promise us we shall do that. Vision 2030, Vision 2060. Now they have improved. Very soon they are going to say Vision 2090. How many of you are going to be there in Vision 2090? My panel today, as I wait for Prof, because he said he will come in, he's in court. Professor Pierre Lumumba will come in later because he had gone to court. But my panel today is a panel of eminent young Africans. Most of us want to find, most of them want to find a better Africa tomorrow, a better United Nations tomorrow, a United Nations with equality, Yesterday, the whole world of mercantile capitalism came to a standstill. I don't know whether you people realized that the whole world came to a standstill, except maybe in Zimbabwe. Saxon will tell us they were not amused. But the whole mercantile capitalism, commercially, all television stations, including the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, all of them were broadcasting the Queen's funeral. Was she a uniting factor for the entire world? Look at that. From Japan, I looked at all the aspects from Japan, from Hawaii, from Canada, from North Pole, South Pole, East, even in China, Chinese television. The one that broadcast to Africa was carrying the funeral services of Her Majesty, the Queen. Of course, there are misses, hits and misses. As for some of us who might have gained a bit from her reign, education, some of us got education, some of us got housing. I was rehoused, I was reclothed, I was given food 37 years ago when I did not have food. I did not have anywhere to go except Her Majesty's government in Britain said, have it here. They took me to school. I studied. Therefore, I owe them. I owe the taxpayers of the United Kingdom what they paid for me to be here, to have tools of analysis that I must impact to the world and the Commonwealth. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Our topic today, I want first of all to introduce all of you, then I hand over to Miriam to introduce the topic to us. Our topic today will be Matsanga Africa's perspective. I will be firing questions and I will give you each time to talk. Miriam will introduce the topic as my co-host from the studios and bring us up to date with the current news right in Kenya headlines only. What is going on, as you are aware, in Nairobi, we have change of government where smoothly there was a transition. Thank you very much, viewers. Right from Harare, we have Saxon Zima. Welcome to the show. Just greet the people, Saxon.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, viewers. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Thank you very much. That is Saxon Vuma. Engineer Saxon Vuma is a senior analyst and expert on African issues, especially the Southern SADC issues. Anything on SADC, Engineer Saxon Zima will tell you, he will do it. He will do it for you. He fixes it. Thank you very much. Welcome to the show. In Nairobi, we have Wanda Wesonga, a teacher, a lecturer, an educationist, a person who teaches. He can teach Swahili very well and English very well. Welcome to the show, Wanda Wesonga.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good evening from wherever you are. This is Wanda Wesonga. As Doctor is saying, Africa is our business, and it is our responsibility to make Africa grow, to make Africa more united and earn the respect, because we are a continent that deserves respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Across in Nairobi, Kenya is our editor and specialist, our investigative editor, specialist, a journalist, a professional journalist who has been a broadcaster, Samuel Tawish. Good morning. Tawish, good morning. Tawish.
Good morning to you, Dr. David Matsanga. Good morning to all colleagues, panelists, and all the viewers watching this program in Kenya, Africa, and the rest of the world. My indeed great pleasure to join you on Matsanga Africa Perspective this morning. Good morning, Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much. Samuel Otawish is a journalist with the Pan-African Punchline Africa TV and has been a journalist, a veteran journalist across Africa. Thank you very much. Next in Lagos, Nigeria, the man representing ECOWAS is Olusoji Ejao. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, sir. Dr. Matsanga, you are a great mentor. Thank you so much for what you are doing, for connecting all the sub-region of Africa. Maybe next edition, I look forward to see somebody from the North Africa and the Southern Africa. Thank you, sir. Well done. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Is also a member, a senior member, executive director of Afrocentric Studies that are based in Lagos University, and he does all his work on Saturday. We have a very big Pan-African conference on Ethiopia, and it will be held worldwide. Thank you very much for the publicity, and I will be giving a keynote speech in that conference. Thank you very much. You are welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting to give us the keynote speech. We thank you.
Thank you. Next is Timothy Lempayai. Timothy Lempayai is a keen follower of Dr. Matsanga somewhere in the tropics of Africa. Timothy, you can say hi and explain yourself. You have just liked my work most of the times, but here we are, Timothy.
Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. We're here to listen to what you have to tell Africans.
Yes.
You're keen for yourself, and we appreciate what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next is none other than Madame Nancy Omar. Nancy Omar is from London, United Kingdom. She is our permanent representative now of Punchline Africa in London. In London, United Kingdom, where Her Majesty was buried yesterday, and now we have a king. Nancy Omar, good morning.
Good morning to you, Dr. Matsanga and the studio, Punchline Africa. This is Naz Omar from London. Hello to everybody, all the panelists, whatever time it is for you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be joining you. Great minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nancy Omar is a very senior activist in the United Kingdom, a member of the Labour Party, a member of the Somali community who has worked hard left and right to make sure that the Somali community works and they are resettled in United Kingdom. He has spoken in various venues across United Kingdom. He is top notch. Not for everybody will hear what she will be saying on the United Nations. Thank you very much, Nancy Omar. Next is Dr. Saverini Alute from Tanzania, United Republic of Tanzania. Good morning, Daktari.
Good morning, Dr. Matsanga. I'm pleased to be here. Today I'm your listener, so I will be following you. Yes.
Asante sana ndugu yangu, nashukuru sana.
Thank you so much.
Sana kwa hivyo kutembelea sisi sasa, sijui Kiswahili yangu ilipotea wapi, lakini asante sana. Thank you very much. Next is Tony. Tony is our Tanzanian representative from Dar es Salaam. Tony, good morning.
Morning, Dr. Matsanga. I'm pleased to be here. I see some of my friends. It's nice to see you again. So let's begin.
And let me tell you, Tony is a veteran. All of you who have been watching East African newspapers, Tony is a veteran journalist. He writes very tough English and writes very good, tough, hitting statements. A Pan-African at heart, a Pan-African up to the end. Welcome to the show, Tony. He's our Tanzanian outpost representative. From time to time, you'll be seeing him on Matsanga Africa Perspective. Next is Karatsino La. I have to take this time because this is the opening show so that I can give you the chance, Miriam, to go ahead straight into the subject. Karatizo Ra. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Karatizo Ra. I am a Zimbabwean. I might be based to be part of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Karatino Ra from Zimbabwe, in the good heart of the hills, the mountains, the valleys of Victoria Falls. Thank you very much. Tony Zakaria, good morning. Are you connecting or you are going? Oh.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, you connected on the other. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Paul. Next is Paul. You have given us as Paul. Yes, Paul. I understand. I know you. Thank you very much, Paul, for connecting us. You can say a word so that we know your microphone is okay. Paul Reynolds. Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. I've got a really bad internet connection. I apologize, but it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for organizing.
Thank you very much. I do understand you from that diplomatic notion. You are listening first. Father, thank you very much, Paul Reynolds. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Back to you in the studio, Miriam Ogutu. Let's begin. Bring us the topic now and tell us why we're here. Good morning, Miriam Ogutu in the studios in Nairobi, Kenya.
Doc, a very good morning to you and good morning to the rest of the panelists from wherever they are joining us and participating in the show. It is a pleasure indeed to have all of them aboard. So as we all know, our topic of discussion today is why the continent of Africa should have a permanent UN Security Council seat. So I'll just give us a bit of a background and then we'll just go back to Dr. Matsanga to help us start the conversation this morning. As World War II was about to end in 1945, nations were in ruins and the world wanted peace. Representatives of 50 countries gathered at the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco, California from 25th April to 26th June in 1945. For the next 2 months, they proceeded to draft and then sign the UN Charter, which created a new international organization, the United Nations, which it was hoped would prevent another world war like one they had just lived through. The predecessor of the United Nations was the League of Nations, which was established in 1919 after World War I under the Treaty of Versailles to promote international cooperation and to achieve peace and security. And on the 20th of April 1946, the League of Nations ceased to exist, having handed over all its assets to the United Nations and having granted the new UN Secretariat full control of its library and archives. Now, the Security Council consists of 15 members of the United Nations, the Republic of China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom of Britain and Northern Ireland, the United States of America, and those are a permanent member. And the General Assembly consists of 10 other members of the United Nations to be non-permanent members of the Security Council, and that is the composition of the United Nations Security Council. So that is just a bit of the background of that. And of course, the United Nations has about 6 organs. 5 of them, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, and the Secretariat. And they're all based at the UN headquarters in New York. The 6th, the International Court of Justice, is located at The Hague in the Netherlands. So that is just a bit of a background of the United Nations. And now I think it will be a great time to just start on our conversation today, why the continent of Africa should have a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. Doc.
Thank you very much. I will ask Tony to close one of the equipment which is making noise when, yes, what, yes. Thank you very much. Miriam, thank you very much. As I've said before, here we are. The population of Africa is well known. We have grown from 1945 to almost 1.2 billion people. But we don't have any say in the world matters. It looks like the world decides for us what we should have, but we can't decide for the world. The Ukrainian war brought to the core what Africa should have and what Africa should not have. When we went to the United Nations General Assembly, sorry, we were told that we should actually vote whether we support Russia on Ukraine or we support Ukraine or the West against Russia. Now, this brings us to a very terrible situation. And the Miriam and the panel, the rest of you on the panel, will understand that time has come. Why is it that we cannot have at least 2 seats to the permanent representatives to be permanent members of the United Nations Security Council? Why do you think so? Are we not entitled to? You can change this question to any format. You can ask from any angle. Let me begin with Saxon Vima from Zimbabwe. The question is very clear, you know it. Thank you.
The United Nations, in its current format, it was the creation by the West to perpetuate their hegemony and control. That's why I've noticed that 1972 China only became a member, replacing Taipei China. But most of these members were the bloc was formed as a result of conquest. Those were victors chose to create an organization to promote its own interests. It's only now where the Russians and the Americans are no longer seeing eye to eye after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's when the world is realizing that not the underlying factors behind the formation of the United Nations. In its current state, the UN Security Council will never allow Africans to have a permanent seat. What we're likely to witness is the formation of another organization where Africa is considered an equal partner. I think you've noticed the formation of the likes of a new organization emerging to counter Western-backed organizations like IMF, World Bank, which were formed as the outlying organization to the United Nations. We've seen the Shanghai Cooperation coming up and the BRICS expanding. The Africans, for the West to allow Africans to have a vote in the permanent seat, it's an exercise in futility. Why? Because that will take away the control them controlling all the affairs. I think they talk of a rule-based order. This rule-based order supports the Western ideology. I think I've mentioned the issue of Russia, why the Americans and the West chose us Africa to pick a side. Why? Because they believe that the masters of our own destiny. Our leaders need to stand up to demand, because a right is not given on a silver platter. We need to demand that seat or advocate for the formation of an organization that treats all citizens equal. Africa is 1.2 billion with the population, but our ideas are not taken into consideration. The West or these powerful nations, they decide for us, which is unfair. And I think we need to demand that either the UN is to be reformed or a new organization is to be formed where Africa is represented. Not only Africa, South America is the same thing. They're not taken into consideration. There's something needs to be done. We need to demand equality. We are treated as second-class citizens. You saw what happened yesterday. One leader came with his motorcade because he's an American from a powerful nation. All the guys who told to come into a bus. That says a lot. Until a time when we start demanding what is rightful ours, Africa will remain subservient. I thank you. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to demand. It's not asking, we have to demand. Mm-hmm.
Saxon, you brought something very. You brought something very interesting. Yesterday, everybody in the world saw the type of division we have. All presidents in Africa, all presidents in the world are equal in the United Nations. Their security is equally the same. Because all of us, all of them are supposed to be protected. But you saw what happened in the United States yesterday, in London. Some leaders were brought in a bus, matatu. You know, it is very bad. And it has created an outcry, Miriam and others on the platform. It has created a very big outcry worldwide, not only in Kenya, not only in Tanzania, not in Rwanda, not in, I don't know, my president of Uganda did not go, His Excellency, President Museveni, my comrade at arms, His Excellency President Museveni didn't go. I didn't see him there, at least. I think if Mugabe was president, he would not have gone into that bus.
But the rest who were carried, Doc, in that bus, they seem to be very happy with that ride. So I don't know.
The what?
They were very happy, the photos that we saw in the buses. They seemed happy. Even I saw my president was happy.
We shall get new views. Thank you very much, Saxon. We want to get various views from various people speaking on the platform. You brought up an issue of equality. The same equality is in the UN. The UN does not give us equal services. The UN only prescribes for us Vision 2030. Why is it that Africa is given Vision 2030? Yet we are the same. For example, why would we be equal in terms of being on the same membership by paper? But we are not equal in terms of services. Karazino Ra, what do you say? Karatizo Ra, you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I wanted to say that our biggest problem is that Africans, we do not have a single unit of purpose when we go to these meetings like the UN. Our organs like African Union do not talk about purposeful things to go and demand at the UN so that we can have a permanent seat. Mugabe used to talk about it, but all the others didn't join in that bandwagon. Only a few of them would talk about it. So everyone has their own purpose in their countries, and getting Africans to unite and have a purpose, like a unit of purpose, should be our most biggest and ultimate goal. I think the other problem is that the caliber of leaders that we are choosing, they serve mostly their interests and not the interest of Africa. But Africa needs people to come together, have a unity of purpose. When they go to African Union, we should be talking about important things. For all these years, there should have been a serious discussion of going to the UN and demanding that we have at least one seat. And that has not happened. And we wonder that what's all these meetings that they do at AU, what are they about? You see, we should go there and do purposeful things and not waste time about going on funerals and burying the Queen when we have a UN coming up and we haven't put our thoughts together as Africans. That is the most important thing that Africans need to do today. When we go to those meetings, we come together, make a decision to go and demand for at least a seat, because we are a significant number of population in this world. Thank you.
Now you have raised a good point there. We are never united to demand these seats. Isn't it true that, Tony, are we not people who go to the United Nations very divided? Each African country wanting to speak its own language. Do we only go there to show perfumes, suits, shop, and come back? Mwalimu Julius Nyerere in Tanzania said, there must be unity of purpose. He pleaded for unity of purpose. The African integration That was Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. He pleaded for unity of purpose. Tony, you are from Tanzania. What is your view of us going there to shop perfumes and the suits and then shop and come back and take more money to United States of America? Because they don't pay. If you look at the number of planes that have been hired by African heads of state, the number of staff going to the UN to give America more money, yet we don't have anything that we are getting out. Do you want your tax to be that way, Tony?
Thank you. You know, I'm happy I come from Tanzania, and I'm happy that the first president of Tanzania was Nyerere. Nyerere was rumored to have gone to meet the Queen one time, and then the Queen, in her etiquette, offered her hand with a glove, and Nyerere wouldn't take it. Instead, it was rumored he proffered his walking stick. And then she understood. She understood that what I have done is not acceptable. She took off the glove and shook her hand. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the leaders who went there yesterday, if they understood the meaning of equal treatment, to be treated with the same dignity and respect as any head of state. When the bus came, they would have said, okay, the bus is comfortable, the bus is okay, but did everybody travel by bus? Yes, no. If it is no, they would have gone back to the hotel and said, provide us with dignity and purpose that you have done for the other countries. Now, it is good that we're having Punchline TV because we can raise these issues on our own without the influence of Sky, of CNN, of BBC, of all the media that give us their view of the world. None of those media has highlighted this disparity, that there was a differential treatment between leaders of certain nations and leaders from Africa. None. Somebody captured and shared it, and it has raised this concern. I think as Africans, we need to have our voices heard. Our voices heard because size-wise, we are bigger than America, China, and Western Europe combined. Population-wise, we are on par with China and India. That's why we should have a seat on the dining table. If the Security Council is deciding issues regarding Africa, we should be able to veto by having a vote. So now is the time. I think Punchline TV Africa is going to give us the opportunity and the platform to raise issues independent of what our political leaders think. But I also think the caliber of leaders you are having, with due respect to all the leaders that attended, tells us that they are not willing to talk about the hard issues and raise issues of concern that the general population feel. Like we feel they were not treated with equal dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It goes back to saying the treatment still is shown in all places where we go when it comes to lending money. Can anybody on this platform explain to me what a money lent, a debt, American debt is equivalent to African debt? A debt is a debt. If you have been given money by IMF and America also has been given money by IMF, are you not all borrowers? Why is our debt classified as African debt? Nazi Omar from London, you are an expert on advocating for Labour Party activism. Tony Blair brought the first independence sanctions on Zimbabwe. We didn't have even a voice. And as Labour members, you remember in 1998, Nazi Omar, you and I stood up in the Labour conference in Brighton, and I refused what Tony Blair was saying. Nazi Omar from London, tell us.
Yes, thank you very much. If I may start with, should we have a permanent seat? I think, yes, Africa have to be at the decision-making table. We're past the age when decisions are made by others on our behalf without our consensus. But that said, is Africa so ready to be at that table? And are they united in wanting to be at that table? And what does Africa want? I think it's how I would put it and how I would phrase it. What do our leaders want? As Africans and as a big advocate of Pan-Africanism, I would say, yes, we do need to be at the table, but then our leaders, are they together? Do they want, do they have the same vision? Are they even going to agree on who is going to be representing them? Or do we still have the, the division, as we do have it still here in Africa, as we cannot agree on the Pan-Africanism way and the way forward, which I always say that the Pan-African, that body is...
Nazi Omar,
yes.
To you, it is our own problem, is it?
To me, yeah, we need to be on the decision table. Yes, the time is past, but then if I put it on the flip side, it is our problem. It is our issue. It's not something that we are lacking of demanding. We should have demanded this long time ago, but then it's lack of having visionary leaders who know what they want and who can agree on what they want collectively rather than individuals.
And we have seen several instances in Africa where we don't even agree on the chairperson of African Union. So, like the choice of Amina Mohammed versus Mohamed Faki, we divided ourselves on the French-speaking countries, and we recently saw ourselves fighting in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in African Parliament. I think some people were injured, if I can. Some people were injured very badly. Reno, Nazir.
Yes, and actually that still brings up the issue when the idea of Pan-Africanism and coming together in Africans to be united against the neocolonialism, even at the beginning of this, we already had divisions. We had the Casablanca group and we had the Monrovia group. So from the very beginning, the idea was already divided, and this was something that Nkrumah really actually fought for, and I see him to be, may he rest, his soul rest in peace, but who was a great advocate and a great believer in the only way we can be strong is if we unite as Africa and become one. But today, do you see any of that happening? We do not even trade within Africa. The trading within Africa is minimal, but we rather have mangoes coming from, other nations than within Africa.
Why can't you be very honest and say mangoes coming from China? Yeah, because mangoes are coming from China. Paul Reynolds. Nancy, stay there. Paul Reynolds, then I will come to Wandawe Songa, the Swahili senior lecturer. Paul Reynolds. What do you think about this?
Thank you, David. Yeah, I raised my hand because I just wanted to say, as a visceral response to one of your remarks, I mean, you can argue that Africans divided themselves, but the truth is Africans were divided as a deliberate strategy in order to enable the empire, which was handed gracefully over to the United Nations and the US with the formation of the UN, right? So that's the key point. which is division, which is everywhere in every human community, you can either be muted or moderated or harnessed or encouraged or indeed created. Or created. And it is created. You and I at some other forum, will have an argument about the situation in one specific country, but in
Paul.
the end, I think that Africans, we need to figure out how to moderate our internal division, because in the end, outsiders, Europeans, Americans, and others want to exacerbate those divisions. The United Nations was created specifically to enable the smooth passage of ownership of the empire from one group of people to a broader group of people, to continue the exploitation and the system of privilege which operates today. And the points about African leadership, I agree. I mean, to some extent, it's our problem. We elect the wrong people, but they're bribed to go to the UN. It's a shopping trip. Biden is running an African Leaders Conference in December. It's a Christmas shopping trip. And these guys are going to go.
Paulo, you brought something very interesting. All African leaders are preparing their suits to go there.
Well, quite. And so, I mean, I think if African leaders...
They go for shopping spree or something like this.
I think that's how, in the end, when they go home one evening and say, shall we go to New York in December? Then somebody else is going to say, all the children and the rest of the family go, hell yeah, let's go. It's all paid for.
The children are sent in advance.
Biden's paying. My point is, can I make a point, David?
Paul, let me come in and give you sense of of humor here. I saw one man from Kenya displaying himself with a suitcase in New York streets. And this is a former governor of Machakos. Did you see him yesterday with a suitcase on the streets of New York? That here we have come. Is that the type of Africa that can demand a Security Council seat?
Well, I mean, clearly, I think that's, if going on from my point about division, I mean, there's no question in my mind that we deserve in Africa between 15 and 15 and 50, depending on how you measure it, by population or by landmass, representation at the UN Security Council. But obviously, in an extension of the divide and conquer mentality, they're going to say to us, well, who represents you? If our leaders in Africa don't actually subordinate their individual interests and prioritize the strategy of unification, then they're going to continue the outside world will run rings around us in Africa. We have to unite, and we have to somehow figure out a way of amplifying authentic African voices and reconciling those differences, or at least moderating the difference between us so that we can present a united voice, whether it's at a political level or a cultural level. And maybe the AU is past its sell-by date, right? Maybe the AU isn't working. We need some other kind of configuration.
Paul, is there any AU left?
Well, I hardly think so. I
wish
have
there
was.
AU, or we have AU on paper?
We have AU on paper. We have a parliament that took 18 months to get together because, as you said, they were arguing about where it should be and who should be in charge and who the representatives. And they're arguing about personal interests and some narrow political interests in exactly the way that the West wants us to continue to argue and fight amongst ourselves. And the leadership, people like the other people on this call, are actually the real leadership of Pan-Africanism, the unity that we all know is essential for success. Very few people are prepared to prioritize that and not to prioritize their narrower personal interests. And that's our challenge. So we have to work, I think, to somehow figure out how to make a sort of a representative voice, which really does represent the vast majority of 1.4 billion Africans, which really does represent the true, authentic, faithful objectives of ordinary people in the African continent, rather than the narrow interests of political and corporate elites.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul Reynolds. You've raised the serious points. One of the points that Paul, as I come to you, Olusoji Ojao from West Africa in ECOWAS, you are in Lagos. You were telling me this morning you don't even have power. And Nigeria has got 241 waterfalls. And Jesus Christ, I don't know how to say this here. 241 waterfalls, equivalent of Victoria Falls, but you don't have power. But you want to have a seat on the United Nations Security Council, and then why are we not having it? Are we disunited? Paul Reynolds says yes. First of all, it was already designed for us to be disunited. They came with politics, democracy. They told us, start with democracy. While you fail in democracy, they say the democracy must look like this. Then they leave you there while you are still bargaining that the elections must be free and fair. Then a country that has been 1,922 years is telling you to do democracy in 1 day or 6 months. So have you seen where we are? Olusegun Ojao from West Africa, Lagos, Nigeria.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Matsanga. I like this discussion. And what last speaker said, you are actually amplifying what you are doing here, sir. You are doing what African leaders have failed to do. You are amplifying authentic African voices, authentic Pan-African voices. Those leaders, they are just gatekeepers for the Western interests. That's what I want to say. Then number two, I want to align myself with Nazi Omar, who made a very interesting presentation or argument that let's look within Africa. We need not look for external enemies. All right. So every time when we externalize our problem, in psychology, there is an inner, okay, I'm poor because my parent is poor. That is self-defeatist. You are defeating yourself. But you can't say, okay, because my parent is poor, then I'm born to be poor. All right. So Africa, though the Western world, the structure of the United Nations has been created and concretized before African countries got independence in the 1960s. It was happening in 1945. So we are just catching up. All right, that's the game plan. Africa joined the United Nations as catching up strategy. So the point is that it was structured against us, but we ourselves, we are not looking inward. You just mentioned that in Africa, we are importing mangoes. How do you explain that? What about Brazil? Brazil was just catching up. What about Chile? In Brazil, they produce cassava and they generated ethanol from that one as alternative to fuel from petroleum. So you can see, we African, we have to actually look at what is wrong with us without looking at the external problem. And for me, let me give you an point, African leaders in support of Naz Omar. In Africa, we have 4 power blocks or hegemon. I mentioned Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, or South Africa. These are potential candidates for United Nations Security Council membership. And the topmost of them is South Africa, which is the most westernized African country. The second contender, which I can vote for, is Egypt. And the last two, Nigeria and Kenya, we are just, let me say Nigeria, we are still struggling with Boko Haram. And as you said, electricity is a problem here. Otherwise, I could have put on my camera now. So what I'm not saying is that, see, Pan-African voice, let's look at what is wrong with us. And we, on the outside, we are not in government. What can we do to bring change to Africa? Because these people you are seeing there, they are basically the gatekeepers of foreign interests. So I think we should tailor our discussion, like you said. I would suggest actually, which I want to say, we should take this discussion beyond, let me call it now, online discussion or Zoom discussion. African Union is going to clock 20 years this year. Can we have a discussion about that? To examine the role of African Union. For me, I was watching the Senegalese president going to Russia to talk about Ukraine. And this man has never visited Tigray. So what is wrong with us? Look at Nigerian politicians. They are settling political scores. They have to travel to London, UK to negotiate political discussion.
Olusegun, can you emphasize that point again?
Nigerian politicians, I will share the link with you.
The one of the chairman of African Union has never visited the Tigray.
Yes.
But he has
never visited that place. Yes. I say
Oh, okay. This is.
And he went to meet Putin and talk to Putin. He went to Putin. So basically, in my own, I teach political science for my students in Cotonou, and actually, I'm a visiting lecturer in France on migration. Now, what I see is that Africa, as you mentioned in the introduction part, Dr. Matsanga, you mentioned it. Africa, we are a lot of peacekeeping forces. Africa deserves to have somebody in Security Council, so that person will be able to voice and represent our Africa's interests. African voice, what we are seeing in Security Council is not authentic African voices. It's not authentic. So we need an African representative. And for me, I'm a Nigerian, but I will suggest and I will vote for South Africa or Egypt to represent us in Security Council. Now, let's come back home anyway. Let's come back home. As Anasa mentioned.
Osonju, hold the fire. Kenyans are going to come down for you on that. Why did you leave? Kenyans will say, you see, that is exactly what Paul and the Nazi Omar were saying. We are first of all disunited. If you say South Africa and Egypt, you are
no, because they are better positioned and better organized. And let's say the facts. Let's say the truth of the facts. Now, I'll give you some instances now.
We are in discussion. Paul, hold the fire. We are in discussion here. And that you have, ladies and gentlemen, crossfire anywhere. If you see something is not very right, it's paining you, don't keep quiet until I reach you.
I don't agree. I don't agree with this.
You are saying we are disorganized. Is Kenya disorganized? Is Nigeria disorganized?
Yes, Nigeria. Okay. Let me say something, sir. Let's bring our attention to focus. If you say Africa should be represented in Security Council, the next question, from analytical perspective, is to say who are the potential contenders. That's the first question you ask. Then, if you now zero it down, you now divide Africa into five.
Can I ask you one question, or
please do, sir.
Jao.
Yes.
You're a senior lecturer in political science, and I want to ask you: South Africa has got a nuclear weapon, isn't it?
Well, they try. Yes. I don't know if they dismantle it.
South Africa has got a nuclear weapon. It's the only one on the African continent close to nuclear weapon. Yes. But they are now lights go off and on. What would happen to the nuclear weapon? Is it organized? Kenya has no lights off and on.
I get your point. See, no, let me say something, sir. With due respect,
I was just picking
I get your point. I get your point. Excuse me, sir. I get your point. What I'm trying to say is that this is uncontestable facts. I want to emphasize it. The most westernized African country, which can be more acceptable to the global north, is South Africa. And that is why South Africa is the only country to hold World Cup. And let me come again.
But how do you put?
I'm a Nigerian.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is now an open debate.
Just a question.
Let me just.
We have to give it to South Africa. We have to give it to South Africa.
Just hold on. Hold on, Olusoji. Hold on.
The moderator, Miriam,
we just need to make sure we're
okay. Nigeria.
Just hold on. Hold on. Because we all listening, and I think that there's something there that you've put forth that we should not just let slide like that. So according to you, South Africa is qualified to be given this position because it appears to be more westernized, and we're sitting here having a Pan-African conversation. Please make that make sense for me and to our viewers.
Okay, thank you very much. I will make that make sense for you. I'll give you analysis. The most advanced banking system on the African continent is in South Africa.
Where?
DSTV television coverage is in South Africa. South Africa colonized Nigeria television space. Nigeria created Nollywood, but we don't have transmission or broadcasting model to reach the world. Our Nollywood content is being projected to the world through the South Africa. MTN
Isn't
is from South Africa.
I'm sorry,
ShopRite
isn't
is
that
from South
all the
Africa.
worst
These are-
examples you could give? Olusoji,
Okay,
sorry.
you can call me Olu, you can call me Olu, or you call me Ajao,
Okay,
Olu,
okay,
O-L-U. That's what we can Olu for short.
Right, okay. Olu, isn't that all the wrong examples that you're giving? That South Africa is suppressing the progress rather for Nigerians, and you think they're the best candidates? If I leave that. Yes, and it does not add up. And if I could leave that there and come back to exactly what we were talking, if Olu could just give us a few minutes. We were talking about the African leaders, and if we look back, yes.
You have actually, Miriam has asked him a question, he hasn't answered yet. And you have asked him a question also, he hasn't answered.
And Wanda Wesonga has been raising his hand there for a while now.
There are so many other people. Now, Nancy, hold your fire. We shall give you even 3 minutes, 5 minutes to hammer Mr. Ojo. Mr. Ojo needs to be hammered. He looks like we are not civilized. Okay, Wanda, you have said we are not westernized. What did you say?
See, the fact is that, a tiger does not proclaim its tigrititude, it pounces. China has to westernize in order to dominate the world. Let's get it straight. See, you don't say Africa is bad. What do you have to show for it? China has to westernize. China has to adopt Western model.
Come in, Wesonga. All right,
Olusoji. Dispassionate. Let's face the facts.
Okay, we are coming back. We are coming back to you. Please allow.
Let me mention one point. I live in France.
Let's put a pin on that.
Let me tell you. Let me say something. Let me mention this point. Please, let me just make this point. I will off my mic now.
Yes.
If in Europe, talk to a white man, they see average South African more acceptable than other African. Elon Musk is from South Africa. He doesn't think like an African man. He was born in South Africa, but he has a white man brain. This is the richest man in the world. His father still lives in South Africa. Elon Musk, he started PayPal in South Africa. So this is the brain. They have a mindset.
The same country that can't even stand as the Africans. Okay, let's put a pin on that. Wanda Wesonga, please have your voice, and then we'll go to Karatiza. I see also you're raising your hand, and I see also Tony wants to say something. But Wesonga, go ahead.
Paulo was raising a hand, and Dr. Severini was also raising a hand.
Yes. But let's go to Wesonga first.
Okay. Thank you. Now, if we glorify Kwame Nkrumah, then we're glorifying Kwame Nkrumah on the grounds that Kwame Nkrumah wanted a free Africa that was not being colonized. Therefore, it's not a case of how much you've achieved in terms of resources, in terms of economy. It's the much that you have, the Pan-Africanism in your head. If today I look at Aikande Hichilema from Zambia, then Aikande wants a free Zimbabwe, though it's from Zambia. Then I look at Aikande as someone who is more African. Therefore, and then when I go to South Africa, then I still look at the cases where we are still fighting people from Mozambique. We are still having issues with, the xenophobic attacks. Then I feel like we still need to build Africanism before we give them the mantle to lead the African agendas. When I come back to Africa and the divisions in Africa, I feel like we only need now to open our eyes. Africa is still being colonized, because if you look into the objectives of the Berlin Conference in 1884, 1885, these guys stopped fighting once they realized that if we colonize Africa, chances are we will fight ourselves. The world wars, that the resolution to have a free Africa was on grounds that the more we colonize Africa physically, then the more we find the reasons to fight each other. But the colonial mindset in them never ended. Therefore, for us to have a seat in the Security Council, it is a call that we Africans have to fight for it. And I'm sorry that African leaders are not ready to do this, because the white man has already gotten into our politics. They have realized that African politics control quite a lot. that they have gotten to a point where they can plant leaders so that they'll be able to achieve their interests. Because if you look at countries like Congo, where we are still fighting, if you look into the fights in Ethiopia, if you look into unstable Somalia, then it tells you it is in the interest of this white man who wants to continue controlling Africa through African leaders. If indeed UN Security Council has an objective of ensuring the world peace, international peace, and we are having conflicts within our continent, then we deserve this seat, a permanent seat, so that we'll be able to present the issues that are affecting Africa, so that we'll bring to an end the conflicts that we're having in Congo, so that Congo will be able to stand on our feet and realize our potentials and grow. But now you trace back the history of colonization, the struggle and the scrambles to colonize Congo. It tells you that a white man is not ready to see Congo peaceful. And if this special seat, the UN Security Council permanent seat, will make Congo a free nation, a nation that is not fighting, then a white man will not be ready to give us these seats. And if I'm told these guys have made the AU a toothless dog, a dog that cannot bite but instead will only bark, then we as the citizens, and it is a call that I will wish that from today going forward, we promote Punchline Africa TV more and more, that we tweet it and retweet it, that we subscribe and do quite a lot. Because you look at it, the formation of Punchline Africa, it is a TV that is trying to awaken the giant in Africa, that is trying to tell this sleeping giant, hey, you're a giant, wake up. And if you don't wake up, someone will always walk on your head. So to answer my brother from Nigeria, it is not how much you have. It is the Africanism in your mind that we want before we give you the mantle to lead African agenda at the Security Council. Because that mindset alone is the one that will lead to a peaceful Africa, a more developed Africa, an Africa that will exploit our potential, an Africa that will be able to debate and promote her resources at international market. Allow me to stop from there for now.
Thank you so much. Wanda Wesonga.
Okay, thank you very much. Doctor, I think, Wanda, you have hammered Mr. Ajao so well that he has agreed and he has said a very good point. He concurs with you on that one. I think he's coming down. He hasn't still answered Miriam's question. How he has not convinced us as to why South Africa is more westernized. You see, the medium and the panel here, the truth is that this guy is speaking, my political scientist, doctor friend of mine, is speaking the truth. When you arrive in Johannesburg, people ask you, welcome to Africa. It's true. Mm-hmm. There is, yes, they say, welcome to Africa. Then you say, where have I come from? Kenya is Africa. Hello? Kenya is Africa. But they say, welcome to Africa. This is the, if you haven't gone to South Africa, then you haven't gone to Africa. And this guy, my professor friend, my doctor friend here, a political scientist guy here, has taken it a job. I didn't know you have that mentality. Welcome.
Olosoji, it's okay, but Doc, you know, whatever Olosoji is saying, that is the mentality of a lot of Africans in this continent. So he's not alone, because we've always been conditioned that anything Western is good and anything Africa is just bad and dark. And that's why for you to be at a place of power, for you to be at a place of a position where you're able to speak well, to be respected, that you have to have some Western aspect in you. And it is a self-esteem issue that we have here in the continent that we have to deal with before we even think about a united African fight for a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. Was it Paul or Samuel Tawish?
There's Samuel Tawish. You are the owner of the house. So let's have Dr. Severini Alute.
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. At the beginning, I said I will be listening, but
you have been provoked by Ajam.
Yes, I've been provoked. So I think what we as Africa looking at having a voice at the Security Council, I think we should not think the way the Security Council was established. The Security Council of today is the group of people owning warheads, weapon of mass destruction, a lot of missiles. And when the United Nations was formed in 1945, none of the African country was independent. So we were somewhere under
colonization, yes.
Colonial of someone who was sitting at the United Nations deciding on our behalf. So we were having no voices. I think the approach would be to reform, the total reformation of the United Nations and the Security Council. We will not go to the Security Council asking for having a seat as the African, the way it was created. We needed to undo what was wrong. I think the Security Council is the council where it meant to make the world secure, peaceful for each of the country to enjoy. But if we think maybe looking at each of the African country, which one will represent us, I think that is the way our discussion and goes wrong. We are now looking inward, which of us is going to represent us. I think the discussion should be Africa as a continent having a seat at Security Council. I think that is the way to go. And the formula, who is going to sit there and which of issue he or she will be talking at that council, I think that should be a decision of Africa. So this is our interest. We want you sitting at the Security Council to talk about these issues that are our concern, but not having say, okay, the way we are discussing it, looking at the South Africa, we are looking the same way as it is today. So we will be there as an attender, thinking the same way the Security Council member they are doing. Because there is no Security Council decision to make, but we don't see the peace. We see the prolonged peace mission in each of the country in Africa. DRC Congo, for instance, now the mission is about 30 years. So how long is it going to proceed? We want African peaceful, but who is going to present our issues to ensure that the issues that are African concern are addressed quite well at the Security Council, and the decisions are made on our beneficial, not to benefit the same people who they were our colonizer. I think that is the thing. We need a total reform, and we need a seat as Africa. We should not look African state, member states, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, whoever. I think I needed to make that point.
You land on that. Thank you very much, Dr. Severin Alute. If anybody has questions on that, I think he has made it very clear. First of all, you can't go hunting and start counting the meat when you have not even, dividing the meat, when you have not got the kill. Get the animal first, then we talk. But the very fact that why are we like this? And ladies and gentlemen on the platform, why are we exactly what Ejao has said today is how Africa looks like. When we reach New York, we start going into lobbies of, now just follow all the leaders who have gone to New York. You go to their hotels and you will see who is coming to see them. You will come back and sink in Atlantic Ocean near Lagos. You won't believe it. the number of people waiting outside the hotels to meet African leaders, to the point that you think Africa has been mortgaged already. Look at the resolutions. Let's look at the General Assembly. I want to bring in this one. General Assembly. And I want to point that directly to Tawish, who has not spoken first round so far. Tawish, you look at Resolution 1608, which Ajao has sat on since 1961. Ajao, I'm not accusing you personally, but I'm accusing your country. Nigeria was mandated to work out the issue of Cameroon, Amazonia. I would like to ask Ajao later on, what have you done about Cameroon, the Amazonian people? Ajao yourself, you come from a country which is divided, Biafra versus the rest. You saw a war in 1967. Are you healed? Are you healed? Is Cameroon having its independence from Amazonia? A resolution 1608, have you read it and seen what the General Assembly recommended? Do we support these resolutions? And for Ajao's knowledge, I want to tell you, Libya would not have been bombed if South Africa did not vote in favor of bombing. Brazil and Germany ran away first. If foreign countries can run away from the resolution, South Africa was paid and it came to vote. And the bombs started raining on Gaddafi. Is Libya the same today?
Not just Libya, Doc, but the rest of Africa. That was the start of the extremist
Look
groups.
at that. You look at that. So those are some of the things that worry most of us in Africa. So Tawish, from that point of view, to conclude round number one, then we come to interventions for points that have come, because Mr. Ajao has raised a lot of our temperature. I think we need to have you more every day. You raise a lot of temperature here, Ajao, despite the fact that you don't have power and power behind you. You have raised a lot of points here.
That's funny.
Our temperature is so high that if you were near us in any of the restaurants, I think the plates would have fallen to pieces. How can you say westernized? No. Paul told you, don't, we are already being programmed. Now you have added the westernized point. Tawish. Mr. Tawish? Is Tawish there?
I think
if Tawish is not there, I can see.
He's trying to, I can see that
he's trying to connect, I can see.
Yeah.
If Tawish is not there, Miriam, let's
we
bring
can have
in,
Karatizo. She's
Tawish, are you there?
I think we're having a problem with his connection, but I've seen Karatizo's hand has been up, and Naz Omar also wanted to say something.
Okay, sorry, Miriam.
Naz, remember, she wanted to respond to a point there, and also Karatizo.
Okay.
So we start with Naz, and then Karatizo, and then Doc. We can see the way forward now after those two. Naz, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. What I wanted to say, we went on about the situation and who is going to sit on that Security Council and this and that, and we all agree that Africans, as Africans, we have to have one voice. But as I mentioned before, I don't want to go back to my point, but I think the problem is not with we need a political sanitization, as our good professor always uses it. And that is what Africa needs, because we had leaders like a great man from Ghana who used to known as the Agri of Africa, Mr. James. And at that time, he was struggling when it was to get Africans decolonized. And he would travel. He did not have the pleasure of traveling with planes and flights and jets and all these luxuries that we see our leaders enjoying today, but he did struggle. And I think the likes of him and Nkrumah would be turning in their graves if they would look at our leaders today, and it's quite shameful. And how these people were organized, they did not have all the pleasure of all this gadgets that we're using, easy communications, but they were still communicating, they were still meeting. If you look that was done in Manchester, where the likes of Jomo Kenyatta and Nkrumah and many more leaders were there to decolonize Africa. It was powerful, and they did not have all the luxuries that this our leaders enjoy today. That said and done, if we go back to, I think Dr. Matsanga here would correct me, as he's a student. I see myself as a student. But in Ethiopia, when they had a meeting there on all Africans. Remember, in 1957, when Ghana was getting its independence, Nkrumah said that would not mean anything if all Africa do not get its independence. So the time they were having a meeting in Ethiopia, and there was that Nkrumah was that visionary leader who was actually saying the only way forward is for us to have one voice, one currency, one Africa, and is the only way we can move forward. But then you had other leaders like, no, let's take it slowly, let's take it quietly. But today's leaders, I am sorry to say this, but you had people saying that they're going there for the shoppings and they're going there for this and that. No, they do not go there with one voice, even if, we're talking about the colonialism. But then remember, when England left all the countries, British left all the countries that it was colonizing, it left a mechanism there that you're part of this group, and the same thing for the French speakers, and etc., etc. So they still did leave some organizations behind that would still do their work, continue their work as colonies, but then in a different format. And I still think now the problem is us to believe in ourselves and know what do we want in order for us to have, what do we want to see to achieve the Africanism that we want to achieve. It's very sad to see a place like Congo. And we do not even have one cell phone in the whole of Africa, a company that produces a cell phone. Somewhere like Kenya, we have a town that is producing fuel, and at the same time, we're not processing our raw materials within Africa. It's not that we do not have great minds. It's not that we are lacking that we are not capable, but then we ship all our great minds to the Western countries. And when somebody's sick, has to go to America, India, whatever, etc., German, to get treatments. And mind you might go over there and get treated by an African doctor. But here in Africa, we do not have them. So it's about time that Africa rethinks its strategy and a way forward. I'll leave it at that. Oh, sorry, I had one more comment in regards to somebody was talking about the beginning, how the leaders were treated. I am sorry to say this, but I'll be defending England in this case. It's only, I am sorry, but it's only...
You are going to bring more fire here.
No. It was only it was only meant for
The bus. Are you talking
but yes,
about
but
the bus?
yes, you were talking about the bus, but the bus decision was already handed over. Everybody knew, and all the plans were given ahead of time for all the leaders as to decongest the routes, and it would have been very difficult. They were also told not to come with their own private jets or private planes. They had to fly commercial, but then obviously we know they would fly commercial first class. And this was a directive that they were given. So at their own comfort, if they did not agree with that decision, they would have stayed back home. I raise my point.
I think
I yell my mind.
Thank you very much for landing. And there is one point that I want to agree with you on that. They were given advance warning that you will use a bus. The Mzungu does not just land on you. He gives you everything in advance. So they gave them, these are heads of state. Surely it was up to them to choose. And that's why I told you that if it was Mugabe, he would have not gone. Or if it was Museveni, he would have not gone. Museveni would have just said, I'm not going. And have created some sort of, my president would have said he's not feeling well this morning, which is normal. God will not be annoyed with you. You know, there are certain things that which you can say, because that bus issue is still very dangerous. I think Nazir, Omar, you have not yet convinced us that no African watching this thing, seeing Buhari crowded in a bus, is going to believe you or listen you himself.
I know, but then you see, these things were already the plans and everything that was going on. These things were already done.
You can comfort us by saying the buses are better than the matatus in Kenya.
I am not gonna even lie, and that shows that we did save a little bit of CO2 emissions. Yeah, a little bit favor for the planet. Look at the positive side of it.
By the way, I would like to tell you that Miriam and the panel, all of you, all hotels in London, you could not book up to today. No new booking was allowed in all hotels except maybe small hotels, bed and breakfast. But all big brands like Marriott, Hilton, it was advance booking.
Actually, Mr. Matsanga, even the small ones, because we had, it's not only head of states and delegates that have flooded London, but remember, there's also the actual natives in United Kingdom, from every part of United Kingdom, had to be there. And some of them were camping for 2 days, for over 24 hours, just to catch a glimpse of the royal.
Sabrina has asked, Dr. Sabrina has asked Miriam that whether they were sponsored. He wants to find out, were they sponsored to go there?
No, our taxes paid for their trips there, I believe.
So, Dr. Sabrina, you have got the answer. The taxes, you have to cough to go and see. But it was a very good gesture to see Her Majesty laid. It was a very good gesture for me. For me, who has been a beneficiary. I know Karatizo will not be happy with me at all before I lend the mic to her. But I want to appreciate that because
but Dr. Matsanga, we appreciate it, but we have not benefited as much, or even a pin drop of what they've taken, they've taken from us. My country in Somalia is still in turmoil.
I have benefited from the education, and for 37 years I've benefited, and I have got to say, thank you very much, Her Majesty.
No, absolutely. We all say thank you, but at the same time,
thank you very much, the new king, I hope
I
he
think I was
continues
next.
to welcome as many people as possible.
I think I'm the
By
next
the way,
speaker.
let's be honest on this. The only country in Europe that can allow Matsanga to speak to and even insult the Prime Minister, Tony Blair or Boris Johnson or Liz or Patel or whoever is in the United Kingdom. The rest of the European countries are so racist, some of them. If my friend Ojao lives in Paris, he will tell you that in Paris you can be easily locked up if you are.
Dr. Matsanga, let me just add one more point for you. Remember, there were people who loved the Queen, but at the same time, they had placards saying, "Not my king," to Charles III.
Yeah, that is the democracy. You think everybody loves. That is democracy. You think everybody loves the Karatizo. I land by saying not everybody liked Socrates. Yes.
Go ahead.
Not everybody liked Emperor Julius Caesar. But Julius Caesar told you that it was not his death that was very important, but it was the destruction of the Roman Empire that was very important, that he was fearing about. So proceed, I land the mic to Karazino Ra on the question of United Nations, because it looks like this thing of the bus is paining us so much. I can see even Tony is not very comfortable with the bus issue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matsanga. I wanted to say, I'm still going to go back to my point when I talked about unity of purpose for Africa. And if we are to even get the seat, I see here we are already disagreeing already on who should take the seat.
It is not disagreeing. It is my comrade from Zimbabwe. It is not disagreeing. We are now brainstorming, and Ajao is the one who banned our brains by bringing in something very
I understand that. So I'm saying I, for one, would not pick South Africa as a first choice because I think they are so much into protecting white capital. But we do have organs in Africa, like the African Union, the African Parliament, the SADC. There should be a way in which, if we were even to get the seat, where everybody would come together and decide who should represent, and even the points to represent us will also go there defined if we were more organized. So I still come to the point that Africa still needs to have a unit of purpose, get their organizations to have teeth so that they can represent us wherever we are. If we don't have some sort of organize, like right now the AU is toothless, so we need to give the AU teeth so that it can represent us as Africans. I am not for what the previous speaker had said, that the more westernized kind of African countries are the ones that are best to represent us, because this is about Africa. We need Africans to represent themselves as Africans for who we are and what we are and what we want to represent as Africans, not for the more westernized countries to represent us. I yield the mic.
All right. Karatizo, Doc, just one moment, sorry. I think Karatizo has raised a very important issue there, and she's, I think, looking for a deal where an AU will have some tooth to bite, or some teeth to bite, rather. You know, we don't even fund AU. France is the biggest fund of African Union, you know that, and other countries. So until we are able actually to own that organization...
Anything about it. Africans need to do something about that too.
Until you're able to take it back and actually make it African and fund it fully, then it's just an institution there for gatekeepers who are protecting interests that have nothing to do with the African people. And that is the sad reality.
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam. You have a point there. The African Union is funded, 3/4 of the money comes from France. And France decides our destiny, Karatizo. We are in very dire problem. And yet we have Coltan.
These are the things that we could be looking at to sort out. Where can we be African in AU? How can we make AU more African? You see what I mean?
Yes.
There are some countries in Africa, that don't pay even the dues, like South Sudan has never paid.
But South Sudan is a special case. I'll speak on behalf of South Sudan.
Let's go on some of the countries now. Let's open up the Pandora
We have been funded externally. As long as we are in this form, AU is in this form, it cannot do anything for us. So we need to, as Africans, to come together again and see what we can do to create organs that can represent us as African. That is the number one protocol for us. Otherwise, we'll go around in circles and we just justify having pacifiers from these countries, and nothing will ever change. We'll always have a cycle of, oh, it's their fault, and we're not representing ourselves. Africa needs to be weaned, to be weaned of these things. We have to learn to do this. Even if it means to tighten our belts and do all these things, Africa needs to be weaned from these neo-colonialists, whatever they are.
I agree with you.
You have a lot of feelings. You know, so many people here on the platform think the way you think, but there is a problem here that we have. That one, surely you look at a country looking for money to hold its elections. Have you ever heard of a country holding elections in Africa and are looking for money from donors? And then when the donors come to ask you for the accountability of how did it go, then you say, why are you interfering with my elections? Two, I am posing these questions to any of you can answer. When we say we don't want sanctions on Zimbabwe, why is it that some African countries go back and even eat with the people who have put sanctions on Zimbabwe? For example, if you are inviting all African heads of state in the White House, and you exclude Mnangagwa, you listen to me, people from Zimbabwe, and be honest. Not only Zimbabwe, the whole Africa. You have invited all African heads of state, and then you say Zimbabwe president should not come. This goes to the question Nancy Omar was saying. Now we have been invited to go to this. Paul Reynolds told us we are going to wear suits and go to December summit. But there's no African head of state who is saying, let's not go to this summit. Let's not go to summit if Mnangagwa is not going. You get my point? We should all boycott civil disobedience of heads of Africa.
I totally agree with you, Dr. Matsanga. I think the whole point started when Mugabe started the land redistribution exercise. All African countries were watching and looking until to a point where Zimbabwe was sanctioned. That would have been the best place for everybody to have a unity of purpose. This is the kind of thing that we want for Africa. Let's take our land. Same thing is happening with Mali. Same thing is happening in Eritrea. And people are just watching. So Africa needs to come together, to unite in another level where they say, during the land reform, when Mugabe did land reform, other African was the best time for them to jump onto the land reform wagon. Now it's difficult for them to have starts into this land reform thing. Others don't even know which way to go, left or right, but they know that at some point they're going to have some sort of reform. It would have been the best revolution right across Africa, because we do not have a unity of purpose. We keep on having these cycles where someone gets this thing, we look at them and we leave them and say, oh, it's their business. You see?
No, I'm sorry. It's not. I'm sorry to interject. There is not we are lacking of unity of purpose, but then remember we've got this string tied on our necks, right?
Okay. Nancy Omar proposed.
Yes.
How do we get this string? That Karatizo is saying we need a unity of purpose. How do we get that string out of our necks?
Yes, getting the strings out of our neck is empowering ourselves within. Within Africa, we go back into mass farming. We go back into our roots. We look at what are we Africa best of. We stop. We stop sending our raw materials to other countries, first world countries, to process it, and then we buy it again at an extra cost. We're getting loans from these countries, organizations, but Africans have to pay higher rate than the rest of the world. Why is that? So we have to look at all these things collectively. But then if a leader wants to say, hey, since Dr. Matsanga is not coming to this meeting, should we all boycott, everybody in the panel? But then you would see Naz saying, no, my people are starving. We've got all these debts to pay. And remember, we are not even paying the debts. If we look at it, most of African countries are still paying the interest. They've not even started paying the actual debts. So we are up to our necks, and the only way we can get away with that is stop getting those donations and those funds and look into doing our own thing, waiving the taxation and etc. on people who are bringing farming equipments and building equipments and etc. And empower our own within, and probably inter-African trade, improve on that. That is the only way we can get out of this vicious cycle. And it's actually really saying this with a heavy-hearted, that if I look at Somalia, it actually makes my heart break. And if you look at the African leaders and the whole world, nobody is talking about Somalia. And it's reached a point where the government is saying that, okay, the people have to be armed to defend themselves against insurgents, when the whole world is looking. Forget about the whole world. Africa is looking. Africa is not giving its own news. Things could be happening in any other African nation, and you look at the newspaper, it's not on the headline. Africa is not even in control of our own news. We're not in control of our own papers.
You're so right. Africa is not even talking about Africa. The Somali issue, it's very hard to even hear what other voices are talking about Somalia. And it is our African problem. It might be Somalia, but it will still be our African problem. And the sooner that Africans learn that we have to come together and do this thing, we're not going anywhere. We are going.
Yeah, but then for you to hear about Somalia, what has happened in Somalia, what has happened currently in Mogadishu, you would have to look at CNN and Sky News, but you will not see that on any African channel. You will not see that on any African newspaper. Yeah, and thanks to Punch Africa.
Nazi Omar, there is also the question of Dagote giving adverts to CNN when they don't use it. The Americans don't use Dagote cement to build houses. Do you have you seen Tony? Do you know that the Americans don't use Dagote cement to build houses in America? It is Africans who use the Dagote cement. But Mr. Dagote cannot give an African television in Lagos. Our friend from Lagos, Dr. Ojo, has run away. We wanted to ask him why
isn't that
advertised with Nigerian televisions.
But this is exactly what it is. The harsh reality is there is no instant coffee fix. Africa is not going to have an instant coffee fix. It has to be a revolution. It has to come. It has to be. One second. It has to be a revolution. There is no instant coffee fix in Africa. We need sanitization of politics, and there is no quick fix. And if you look, we've turned into a continent of consumers rather than producers. We produce minimum 30%, I think, is what we produce, and we import the rest. So this has to change.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see Tony. Yes, Tony, at some point from Tanzania, Yes, Miriam?
I'm saying Tony and Paul, they've been very patient.
Yes, Tony, Paul.
And then also Olusoji.
Dr. Ojao. As we come now almost, and we have another 15 to 20 minutes to finish.
And Tawish.
Tony?
Baton, yeah.
Then Tawish. Yeah. We forgotten Tawish. Tony, unmute your machine. Tony,
yes.
From the United Republic.
What has come out of our discussion so far has just proven the point that we are not united in purpose, even within the panel. I was convinced that we need to go and fight for 2 seats for Africa, for Africa to be represented on the UN Security Council. But I think before we do that, or maybe parallel to doing that, we need to put our house in order. Africa as Africa, we already have the United Nations of Africa. It is called AU. If we wanted to discuss security issues, we should have a Security Council there, where we can discuss what do we do with security for the Great Lakes, what do we do for the insecurity we see in Central Africa, in the Horn of Africa, and come up with specific interventions, resolutions that are followed by action inside Africa, not going to the UN. We need to put our house in order. We are talking about trade. There should be a session where we talk about how do we do trade between countries. We shouldn't be complaining. We go to EU and say, give us quotas. We go to America, we want AGOA. But what are we doing, us as Africans, to improve trade? That can be done through dialogue with the existing mechanisms. For example, we have the East African Community, we have SADC. What are we doing without that within those organizations? Before we go and talk to the outside, we need to talk right here in Africa. What is happening with ECA? Why are we not trading with Nigeria? Why is Nigeria not buying Tanzania coffee, Tanzania tea? We have the best tea here. But I'm sure if you go to supermarket shelves in Nigeria, you will find Lipton tea. Why are we not buying Kilimanjaro tea, Kilimanjaro coffee? It is here. So there is a lot that we need to do as Africans before we go out to the UN and say to the UN, we need a seat on the United Security Council. We need to have a voice, but that voice has to be united. There is an issue that was raised by our colleague in Nigeria about if we wanted Security Council seats, who would most likely be acceptable. I am sorry, my guy. Whoever we select when the time comes for it will represent African voices, will not present what is acceptable to West. They will be representing what is desirable and acceptable for Africa, for Africans, and for the continent. So, personally, I don't agree that the most developed African countries should be the ones to represent us if the time comes. They should be the one with the most developed African perspective, African heart, that they think whatever is going to be, they would have voted probably with the rest of the Western world to bomb Iraq or Iran. Some of these things African countries didn't agree with. We didn't agree with...
let me come in, Tony, let me come in and ask you. Miriam asked a very cardinal question. And Miriam brought up a cardinal issue of funding. You are telling us to go back to the African solution, the African Security Council. The Security Council is funded by France. You don't have even your own money to pay troops that are guarding Mogadishu.
I think a lot of the funding was coming there.
We depend on AU. So until Africa gets what we call a sovereign fund, why don't we start thinking of an African sovereign fund? Kagame, President Kagame.
And Mr. Matsanga, if I could just add one thing to you. They say they're sending us they're sending us peacekeeping troops while we do not have any peace. What are they for? What are they doing?
DRC troops. DRC has 16,000 peacekeeping troops there. 16,000. Democratic Republic of Congo, and look at where it is today, and the East African community still is planning to send more.
Medium, you have a Nancy. Medium, there's a point there. Are these people making money? No, are these people making money out of our lives?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Matsanga, if I want to add something,
I think let Tony land the mic first.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. You know, we were talking about membership. We are talking about what we need to do as Africans now. There's a lot that we can do, but we need leadership that is willing to lead, not because these issues are popular, but because this is what Africa needs. Africa can feed the world. Africa has a potential to produce enough food to feed the rest of the world. And yet we are net importers. Why are we net importers? We should change that. Africa can share expertise. Instead of our people going and working in the Western countries, we give them opportunity to work within Africa, to develop within Africa the technology, use their knowledge. We can complain about what is not working in Africa, but we also have solutions in Africa. Are we willing to take the hard steps to make those solutions work? Are we willing to hold our leaders accountable that if we have an AU that is being funded by external power, clearly it is going to pander to the needs and the wants of that external power? We need to stop that. Are we willing to take that? And I yield the mic.
Okay.
Yes.
Before
let me quickly respond to that, Dr.
Olosuji, before you come in, Olosuji, yes, and I'm coming to you. But there's somebody who was supposed to come before you, and then after him you can come. That is Paul, and then we'll come to you, Olosuji, please, if you don't mind.
Then Tawish.
After Paul, Tawish, and then
Rwanda.
Yes. Paul, if you can hear us.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I've been listening intently, and the last speaker really paraphrased my sort of view reasonably accurately. So I won't waste so much time. But I think my thesis is that we should reject, at least at a philosophical level, every aspect designed by empire. So we reject the UN in a concept. We reject the AU in concept. Now, in practical sense, how do we move forward? And I think the point has been made several times that the mentality, we need to work on the mentality because there's a whole bunch of underlying challenges which draw division, and not surprisingly because they're normal human discussions. And I think we need to recognize that this will take time. We have to build a consensus. We have to build a constituency of people who don't see Africa in the same frame as we were given that frame, by the British or by the UN. We reject the concept of the countries as defined by people outside of Africa, starting in the Berlin Conference and continuing with the whole UN process. Philosophically, we reject these things. We want to understand, how do Africans think about the geographic constitution of the country? How do Africans think about the political economy? How do Africans think about the environment? How do Africans think, point made, and I always come back to this one, the media, how do we project our voice, the African voice, authentically? Who does it? What institutions do we have? And indeed, how do we, in the end, create a sort of a sense of mentality across the whole continent when we can actually see the number of people who agree with us about Pan-Africanism and the need for unity as a priority in order to allow us to build the solutions and implement the solutions which will restore our sovereignty, and then we can start to make progress. I think what we need is a considered, deliberate, purposeful effort to develop that constituency before we actually try and go too far too fast. So, for example, I think, what is the right kind of economy? What's an authentic African economy? What's the lowest level of division? What's an authentic political system in Africa? What does democracy mean in Africa? We can debate this forever, but in the end, I think we need a process which allows as many people who are Pan-African in nature as possible to raise their voices. We amplify their voices, and then we reconcile between those voices something which is as broadly as possible representative of the African view on these things. So most of the politicians that we have in Africa are not Pan-Africanists. So we must reject, in principle, I think we must reject them as well. Of course, then one has to be pragmatic and practical. How do we move from here to the sunny uplands where we've restored our unity and our prosperity and ultimately our sovereignty? And that requires some kind of organization, some kind of institution, something that's more than a movement. So to operationalize everything that we've been talking about. I'll land there.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
Thank you.
Paul.
You are landing, and there is a newcomer who has just arrived. Alicia, you want to listen? Or you want to make a contribution?
Okay.
I think before Alicia, I think it will be fair to allow Samuel Tawish to say something, and then
yes. Sorry.
Tawish,
sorry, Tawish, don't kill me.
We've kept him waiting. Yeah.
Tawish, go ahead. We tried you and you didn't come.
Not really. I think I just had some a problem in terms of network connectivity, but thanks, I'm back. And I almost wanted to censure the moderators of the program because, again, you appeared more leaning on a section of the panelists more than the others. But that is not the point. I welcome the opportunity, and I think I must make my submission as fast as I possibly can. One is that I will want to address the question of whether really, because that is the topic of discussion we are having, whether really Africa has a point in terms of securing or looking for this position of the UN Security Council permanent seat. And I agree with that. I agree with that assertion that it is time that Africa really needs to get this position. And we're listening even to the panelist submission. Most of them really have opined to that position that it is time Africa really needs to pursue that route, and it's not only about having one or a single permanent seat at the UN Security Council, but I think also we need more representation when it comes even to non-permanent members. But critical for the UN Security Council, I think the permanent membership is one which is very, very vital and critical in terms of running of the affairs of the UN Security Council. And African continent and the African nations really forming a huge chunk of the membership of the UN General Assembly and the UN agency generally. I think it is time. It is what I will call long overdue that we need really to advocate and champion for this position because again, a big percentage of the issues, more so on the wars and security front that are being discussed or even decisions being undertaken by the UN Security Council permanent membership really are more of African nations than even the European nations. And I think it is a very, very constructive debate and a genuine concern for that matter coming from the African continent and the African people as to why we would have more representation coming from the European nations and African continent really not having even a single permanent membership in the UN Security Council. This is something, a discussion that is welcome, one which is timely, and one which is actually long overdue. An agency which was formed, I think, 1945, up to date, almost about 8 years down the line. It is not something that we can continue really arguing about. I think it is moment we need to talk about general reforms at the UN Security Council, and to that respect, therefore, also how we are going to expand membership, if not to include the African membership in terms of the permanent representation at the UN Security Council. Secondly, I think I also want to agree with sentiments that have been made by most of my colleagues here, and more so Omar Naz, and of course also Tony, that in as much as we are rooting and championing for African continent or African nations to be included in the UN Security Council, the critical organ of the UN United Nations General Assembly, the question we should be asking ourselves, is the African continent really united in the first place? Because for us to be able to champion and root for this position and other seats and interests at the UN, we must be asking ourselves: are we individually or collectively really united to be able to champion or even to advance our interests per se? The situation on the continent today presents a very ugly situation in terms of the diversionary approach on the security front, on the poverty, corruption. There's so many wars, and even the unstable governments that we will continue to witness today in the African continent. Do we agree by the end of the day that, for example, the African Union is not living up to the expectation and the desire of the framers of the African Union in the first place? Does it have the teeth really even to bite? Is it living up to what we decided it to undertake? My considered submission will be no, because again, some of the issues, and when we even go to the to the global arena to be able to champion for the interests of the people of the African continent, we have fallen short of expectation, because more often than not, there's even lack of agreement, there's lack of consensus, even from the African Union itself, or the membership of the African Union itself. We have lost so many opportunities globally on the global arena because of the lack of the unity of purpose coming from the African Union. There are so many opportunities, there are so many chances and positions that today the African nations or leaders have lost in the global arena because of that lack of unity of purpose. And I think it is moment we need to have a retrospect and to have to look inward and ask ourselves, what is it we can do anew or better for us to be able to champion our interests better on the global front. There's also an issue of this over-reliance in terms of foreign donation and maybe the benevolence, if I should put it that way, from coming from the foreign nations. And I think it has worked largely to the detriment and to the disadvantage of most of the African countries, in that this over-reliance has seen most of our African countries and even leaders really hold divergent views from that which matters for the African people. And very lastly, because I may not really get a trail of everything that has been mentioned or the commentary that has been made by my colleagues, but suffice to mention the issue of which African nation or nations really will fit the bill in terms of getting a slot in the UN Security Council permanent membership. I think it is more like putting the cart in before the horse. I think the discussion now, which is vital is that let's first of all advance the case of us securing, as the African continent, securing a slot or two at the UN Security Council before we start now discussing which of the African nation really can fit the bill. In my own considered opinion, there's no African country which, in my considered view, which is superior to the other or which is inferior to the other. All of us are equal as long as we are given the opportunity and as long as we represent the aspiration, the expectation, and the hopes of the nations we represent and the African continent for that matter. It does not matter which of the nations will eventually be able to get this seat. But what is important for us today is to champion for this. It's regrettable that the dream and the aspiration that our founding fathers and the leaders that came thereafter, the likes of Robert Mugabe, for example, from Zimbabwe, are one of those leaders who stood steadfast in questioning the UN's General Assembly and the global agencies why African continent or the African nations at this time and age cannot be allotted say, for example, a seat at this very critical arena. And you also saw, for example, Muammar Gaddafi that you have just alluded to during this discussion, one who was fronting for, of course, a single currency for the African continent, or even visa for the African, a common visa for the African continent. These are some of the issues that if we really want to live by the legacy of these leaders, let us come out and jealously try to guard the interests and aspirations of the leaders who lived before us. And by doing so, we'll have something really to give to our generations that will be taking over from us. Because of time, again, I may not be able to exhaustively discuss about this. I think it is a discussion that will want more time to carry on with. But it's good that Punchline Africa TV has begun this discussion. It's a crucial discussion and a constructive for that matter. I thank you, Dr. Matsanga, for the opportunity and all the colleagues for the submissions you've made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tawish, for landing the mic. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I now go to Mr. Troublemaker from ECOWAS.
I'm not a troublemaker. All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Olusoji Ajao.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me now speak. Don't let me speak as an activist. Let me speak like a teacher that I am. Now, I will start by saying that in international relations, it works on balance of power. And when you come to balance of power, we have what we call hegemony. The hegemons, they maintain balance of power and they maintain security. Africa is divided into 5 zones: the North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and Southern Africa. All countries are equal, but all of them are not equally endowed. In each region, Nigeria is an hegemony in Western Africa. We maintain peace in Liberia, we maintain peace in Sierra Leone. There was a coup in Sao Tome. Obasanjo went there and restored peace there. Even during a military regime in Nigeria, a Nigerian president Abacha went to Sierra Leone and reinstalled a democratically elected government. That is the power of hegemony. So we cannot say in international relations, all countries are not equal. Let me state that again. In European Union, France and Germany dominate EU politics. Economically, Germany is there. Politically, France is there. Macron. When Macron is speaking in international forum, the German chancellor will not talk. I'm coming, I'm laying a template. I'm not talking as an activist now. I'm trying to educate as a teacher. Now, let me come back now. Now, as I'm looking at that hegemony perspective in Southern Africa, let's face the facts. Which country dominates Southern African politics? Is South Africa. I'm coming. I lay a template. That's a premise for argument, and I will make it a conclusion.
Okay.
A premise that there's an hegemony that dominates politics. All right. In Southern Africa, South Africa controls Namibia. We know that already. It's a fact. We know. Now in Kenya, in Eastern Africa, Kenya is there. It's a powerful hegemony there. Kenya sent peacekeepers to Sudan and South Sudan, just as Nigeria sent peacekeepers to Liberia. So that is the power of hegemony. And that is why Ruto, on the days of inauguration, he appointed Uhuru. That's the power of hegemony, he said. That's the assertion of that power. So you cannot equalize Kenya and Rwanda, for instance. That is it. Hegemonic power has money. Money rules the world. And I like what Dr. Matsanga said. You are talking about Africa for Africa. Where is your money? If there is a song in Nigeria, if you don't get money, hide your face. Somebody, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. That's a fact. He who pays the piper dictates the tune. Now, let me now come back to the conclusion now. Sir, Dr. Matsanga.
Nazi Oma, where are you?
Dr. Matsanga, I'm coming to the conclusion now. I will drop the mic.
Yes.
You are doing fantastic.
Yes.
No, you have dropped the mic now. Dr. Matsanga, you are doing fantastic. Next time you are having this discussion, I would like you, sir, let us organize a physical event, possibly in Tanzania. African Union are 20 years. Let us dissect.
Go ahead, speak.
We do a discussion. Now, what I want to do, sir, I'm not setting an agenda for you. I'm just telling you, all 54, like Mr. Paul said, they are not Pan-African. And let me say something again. We have to disintegrate leadership and politics. All of us in this platform, 11 of us, we are leaders. Not all politicians are leaders, and not all leaders are politicians. Mandela was a leader before he became elected politician. All right. So we are all leaders in our own spaces. What we are doing now, we are leading. So we are more Pan-African than most of the African leaders. So what we can do is that let us build structure. And last week I said, let us build structure. I'm looking at AU conference in which Dr. Matsanga could organize. We can bring Tambo Mbeki on board. We can bring Uhuru Kenyatta on board. We can bring Mo Ibrahim on board. We can bring Dangote here on board. We can bring Strive in Zimbabwe on board. let us talk about what is happening.
Garatizo will
now, if you keep talking here,
we talk about strife.
Yes, and I don't know, whatever the case, we just bring, I meet leaders who are not in political offices. Dr. Matsanga, you are not in political office, but you are influential. No. That is power. What is power? Yes. Power is the ability to make somebody act in the way you want. That is power. That's the influence. That is social media influencers. Dr. Matsanga, you are influential. You are not in politics, but you are a leader. So I want to now use that power to organize a conference in which we have somebody from Northern Africa, from Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia. Let them be there. Somebody from Central Africa, Cameroon, DRC Congo. Let them come there. We cannot speak for them. Now, with that conference, we can quite be concrete. So when we have this conversation, the leaders will recognize, okay, there is alternative voices to what is going on now. And again, let me now just conclude. The point is that if you think Pan-Africanism in the days of Nkrumah, you want to locate in these African leaders, you have messed it up. My leader in Nigeria is Pan-Niger Republic. It doesn't have anything about Pan-Africanism. The man is so clueless. He's building a railway from Nigeria to Niger Republic, and he's not building railway from Lagos to Cotonou, which has more economic relationship with Nigeria. Because Buhari parents are from Niger Republic, so he's connected with them. Buhari doesn't care about Africa. He's not Pan-African minded. Even the South African president is not Pan-African minded. So, but I want to say that the current generation of Pan-Africanism is going to be, well, let me continue. I'm just making my submission anyway. I'm not trying to agitate now. Now, the point is that we cannot keep on agitating. It's high time we start to organize. We cannot keep on agonizing on what is not going to work.
You made your point.
In the global north. But sir, let us start. What we are doing here, we are just agonizing. Let us start to organize. Thank you. I dropped my point.
Yeah, Dr. Olusoji Ajao, you have made very critical point.
And he came up, this time he wore the teacher hat. And Doc, me and you, I know, we were just burning with questions while he was presenting, yes. Especially the issue around hegemony. And I do agree with you, Nigeria has the highest GDP across Africa and the most populous country followed by Ethiopia. I do agree with you. The same country can't even fight the insecurity that is in there. So a lot of factors I think we have to look at when we are considering some of these positions. I don't know, Paul, we had somebody else here. She left. Alicia, I think she left.
She left, Alicia left. And now we have Wanda, as we come to we shall be giving each of you 1 minute each after Wanda to come down with solutions. And one of the solutions, wait first, Wanda.
Okay, thank you.
Ajao has brought a solution. We better start organizing instead of agonizing. Mm-hmm. Is that what you said, sir?
Mm-hmm. Housekeeping.
Thank you very much.
That is it. Because these guys are not willing. Can you, Dr. Matsanga, can you bring Tambo Mbeki on board? Yes. Can you bring Uhuru together? Let's shake the house. Let's shake the table. That's what we say in Nigeria.
Shake the table. But when you have no electricity and yet crude oil is exported to Saudi Arabia,
it's because we are docile. We are docile here. We are docile.
Nigeria produces crude oil, exports it to Saudi Arabia, refined from Saudi Arabia and refinery, and brought back to Lagos to be sold to you.
It is because we are not entrepreneurially minded, and Dangote is bringing business with that. Dangote is building a refinery. That's it. You find solution, you don't complain. Dangote saw that, and Dangote is building the biggest refinery in Africa, in Lagos here. So we should not just keep on analyzing, and that we call paralysis by analysis. Most of African activists, they analyze, they take zero action. That's analysis by paralysis.
Me, I don't do analysis, I do frank confrontation.
It's strategy.
I think if you have followed me, you have seen my confrontation. I go it head on. Like now, I banned myself from going to Addis Ababa, ever. as long as Mr. Muhammad Faki is the chairperson.
That's a good one. I like it. That's why I said let's take it further again. Let us analyze that African Union itself. 20 years.
On the platform, you better know it. As long as the Chadian man is the chairperson of African Union, I would not step in Addis Ababa. And his term of office is ending next year. So I will take over that union, then I will step there.
Then again, we need to analyze the tenure of this man in office. What has he done?
Nothing. I mean, look.
That's why we need to have a conference and we have a resolution.
Let me tell you, when we tried to bring the lady, to defend the lady in New York, the Zimbabwean lady, the man hated me because I defended the Zimbabwean lady. That lady who was suspended. And then I discovered that he had sold our organization to the French. And we are just puppets. Look at the issue of International Criminal Court. Before we end, and all of you are going to end very nicely with a lot of time to speak. International Criminal Court. We made the resolutions that no African head of state should ever be taken to the ICC. I'm telling you, it won't be long before you hear another African head of state has been taken to the ICC. Nobody has followed this implementation of these resolutions. So here we are. Why should a country that does not take its nationals to the ICC order us to take our nationals to the ICC? Isn't that a very good question I'm asking? The United States of America does not send its nationals to the International Criminal Court. Why should a country in Africa send its own people to be jailed?
I agree with you in that position. That's what you have to actually teach African young people. This is your position. We have to teach young African people. Nigerian boy or girl should know what you did in ICC. Yes, you have to know.
Look at that.
Understand.
Now look, we have a war in Tigray. No African head of state is talking openly about this war. All of them either fly quietly into Addis and have some pili rice, you know, very hot rice, and with some things in Sheraton. Then they come out. Nobody is condemning the brutality, the suffering of the people who need humanitarian access. Humanitarian access is needed. Nobody is condemning that there are people who are being starved. Like in the Biafran war, 6 million people or 2 million people, Biafrans were starved to death. Let's look at comparative history and the comparative politics. Shall Africa have Emperor Augustus? My question lands. Wonder, will Africa ever have Emperor Augustus?
Africa has one, but...
For those who don't know Emperor Augustus, after the death of Emperor Julius Caesar, the only emperor who brought back Rome. Have you ever heard of a pact called Romana Pact, which is the Rome peace? He's the only man who talked about peace with Europe. The rest of emperors were the most dangerous. But the man who went to avenge the death of Emperor Julius Caesar was Emperor Augustus. I want to invite you, all of you, to be reading. Most of you, let's do the reading. Look at me. I'm liberated because I read. I have no problem. I can answer any question. If you ask me about 54 countries, each capital city, without looking anywhere, I will win $1 million. the capital of Africa. There are some people on this Africa who don't know. That's why when you go to the United Nations Security Council, ask any president or who is there that what is the capital city of Togo? And the question is $1 million. The president will fidget to look for a phone. So how can a man give you a Security Council seat? Miriam, are you seeing the problem we have? Also, Plato said the biggest problem is the opinion, that the divide between the opinion which creates ignorance. You know? If you have an opinion without education, then you create ignorance. The African heads of state who don't know the capital city of Chad, they have to ask their PA, what is it? When you are on national TV, we need to start education now as Africans. That first of all, you are asked, where is the source of River Nile? You say it is in Cairo, and you are an African. Mr. Olusoji, I've been watching your Nigerian to be a millionaire. Have you seen it? And
yes, I used to watch it here. You want to be a millionaire?
I don't know, Miriam, how many of you have been watching that? You can just close your eyes. You can close your eyes and go down. In fact, don't watch it. You can have a heart attack. Because a question is so simple that you who is seated on your bed or in your sitting room, you want to answer it. But this person answers it very wrongly. And he has got a PhD. He's seated on the platform. He was
Europeanized in his education. That was not his education was not Pan-Africanized. That's why we have to keep working outside the government structures.
And that's why Olosunji, we can't agree that somebody who is more westernized should be the person representing us. Now
so you
agree.
No. Okay. You know. Okay. Let me say something now. No, you can. Okay. Let me say something.
I'm glad we are agreeing.
Let me say something now. Let me make my point clear. You can be westernized without compromising your culture. That's what China did. China is westernized without compromising Chinese identity.
China is not westernized. China is a communist.
China
is a communist country. Which country in the Western world
don't get it wrong.
That is communist?
China is not communist. Chinese has billionaires. Jack Ma, Alibaba is a billionaire. It's not communist. Don't get it wrong. What they are using mixed. They are using state-led and market-led. Right. China is using combination of state-led and market-led. That's why they are billionaires.
China has maintained its identity.
Yes.
It has not been it uses its language, it has its own culture, it has its own ways of doing things. It has not been westernized.
I get your point. So now let me make my point very clear. You can be westernized without compromising your identity. I'll give you two classical positions on that. If you read Francis Fukuyama, End of History, and return to that argument in The Clash of Civilizations. That's what Samuel Otten thing. You can adopt them. Look at Saudi. Look at if you go to UAE. I was in UAE, Dubai. Dubai is westernized without compromising their identity. Burj Khalifa is a Western concept. All right, you can adopt them. Their plans without compromising identity. That's my point.
Okay.
Francis Fukuyama is a novice.
Yes.
He's a novice.
You say what?
He's a novice.
But his argument is invalid, and his professor in Harvard replied him with Clash of Civilization.
Yes,
I can adopt your economic system.
I don't
compromising my
identity. I don't agree with Professor Fukuyama, Francis Fukuyama at all, in one essence on African issues, because he looks at Africa as a breed that should have sprung from God directly.
And what's wrong with that?
Yes. No. Africa is a transformation.
Israelites believe that.
Africa is a transformation.
Yes.
We are transformation. It is a transformation. There's only one person who sprang from God directly. And you know that person, whom all of us believe is Jesus.
He's an African man. He's an African man, yeah.
Whom we all believe is Jesus Christ. You have never seen the maternity womb of Jesus Christ. You didn't see.
Oh,
so Lukuyama comes with theories that are Lukuyama's theories are theories of some man on African continent who thinks that it is only violence, and once violence is used, it's the only thing to have a route where you can rule people.
No, I don't agree with all these arguments of Fukuyama. Two things I pick from Fukuyama is that the best way to organize society is through democratic norms. And the best way to organize our mode of production is through markets. That's why I pick from Fukuyama. Now, what I'm not saying is that you can adopt market fundamentalism without looking to compromise your identity.
But
and that's why I give
listen, you are going into very complicated areas. Market fundamentalism. No, wait first. Market fundamentalism, my dear brother, cannot come when you don't have even the market itself.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm using UAE for instance.
We can create. Look, UAE, why is it that, for example, why is it that there are more products that we can buy from Nigeria, and we don't buy them, but we fly to Dubai to buy the same product?
Then you talk to our leaders and the entrepreneurs on the continents.
Thank you.
Dangote is going to different countries. Okay, I'll give an instance. In Nigeria, Strive made the first GSM call in Nigeria. He brought GSM to Nigeria. We had the money, but we have no brain.
Where is the Strive? Where is Strive's company registered?
The Econet. He brought Econet to Nigeria.
Okay,
when Nigeria has the money, we have the money, but we have no brain.
Go slowly. Where is it registered? It is registered.
I don't know where he is, but it's on record. That record cannot be changed.
Hold on, my professor. Hold on. It is registered in France, in Alcatel, and in London. Strive Masiwa's company, Alcatel, Econet, is registered in London Stock Exchange.
I understand.
So look at. I give you an example of yesterday. The whole world. Alicia, can you mute your equipment, please? Alicia, mute your equipment. You are disrupting us. We mute you. We mute you. Yes, thank you. Now, the whole of yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, as I give you 1 minute to land or 2 minutes to land each, the whole of yesterday, the whole world was under mercantile capitalism. Do you agree, yes or no?
I agree, because there is no alternative. What alternative do we have?
Thank you very much.
Miriam, how do you bring something out?
Miriam, as my co-host, let's now look for 2 minutes for each. Wanda was going to begin, and I cut him short. There is also Alicia who has come. Alicia, do you want to say something before we land 2 minutes each to each people? Each person here? Alicia. Do you want to speak, yes or no?
Hello, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
What you were saying? I didn't get your question, please. Just please.
We are saying.
Please check it.
You want to speak?
No, I'm just following the process, and I'm happy about the proceeding. The topic is constructive, and I'm just trying to get to hear from the fellow expert around Africa. It's a good conversation, and I'm interested.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, don't go away. It's now getting interesting because the professor said there are some westernized Africans
who are better off representing
that
us.
The rest of us are not worth it. That we should give that slot of the Security Council
to a westernized African.
To westernized Africans.
Yeah. But we moved from that. I think Tony and Paul had a good answer. to that matter.
Tony gave you a good answer.
We moved from that, yeah.
And Omar has given you a very good answer. We have also explained, Omar, thank you for explaining the position of the Queen bus, the bus yesterday. This is very interesting on a Tuesday like this. And we shall have another one on a Thursday night, of which we shall have both on Twitter and Miriam will be moderating the session on TV. I will be moderating the session on Twitter. And most of the time we shall be changing things like that. Now, this question of the bus has been solved. That all heads of state were given a notice that when you come, you'll use a bus. But they did not bother to refuse. Okay. So, no African should blame the Queen. The Queen is handlers. They were given alternatives, advance warning. So there is no Mzungu who can force you into something if you don't like it. Even when you have stolen and robbed a bank in Britain, they will give you free legal aid by the state. The lawyers will be paid by the state for you to defend yourself. You hear that? So, anybody complaining about the bus yesterday, all the delegations were given advance notice. You want to come in a bus? Yes or no? So it is up to you. Now, the main question we had, why Africa should have a slot on the United Nations Security Council. Wanda, you have 2 minutes, bring it down for us. And then we go in that direction. Wanda, Naza Omar, we come to Tony, we come to Tawish, we come to Dr. Salvena. Wanda is in Kenya, Nazi in London, Tony is in Tanzania, United Republic of Tanzania, Tawish is in Nairobi, Savirin is in Tanzania, in Kagera Sea, a river near the Kagera River. Paul, where are you, Paul? Paul is...
I'm in Addis Ababa.
Addis Ababa, yes. Paul is in the headquarters itself, near there. And then we have my brother from the Rios city of Lagos, in one of the universities in Lagos, where he's a very senior lecturer in political science and international relations. Then we have Alicia listening to some of the views. Now, when you bring down this topic, suggestions, suggest solutions.
Way forward.
What do we do? We have been disunited. Nkrumah died. Patrice Lumumba went. Sekou Touré went. Nyerere went. Amir Cabral went. Obote went. Jomo Kenyatta went. Moi went. Baba Tafawa Balewa went. Gabriel Nasser went. Haile Selassie went. Benebera went. You see, I'm just counting. Mandela has gone. Mugabe is gone. Kaunda is gone. Can I continue counting? They are gone. Mobutu, gone. Idi Amin, gone. They might have not been very good people, like Idi Amin.
And Mobutu.
But Idi Amin also created another tribe in the United Kingdom. The richest people in the United Kingdom, Nazi Omar, are from Uganda. And that's Jesus Christ. So, Wanda, land it.
Thank you so much. When I look at the UN Security Council, it is a question of security, and security is a question that comes to the economy. If I look at China today, it stands at about 1.4 billion people. When I also look at Africa, it stands to about 1.4 billion people. And then this leads to a question, why should 1.4 billion people in China be considered so special, be given the security, with this security addressing the economy, and the 1.4 billion people in Africa left to wonder their security is not of an interest. If I look at, I mean, in this case, China is a permanent member. If I look at Europe in UN Security Council, We have countries like France. We have countries like Russia. Then when I look at UK, I don't look at UK. I look at Wales. I look at England. I look at Scotland. Then I'm looking at Northern Ireland. Then in this case, Europe alone is being represented by France, Russia, Wales, England, Scotland, and Ireland. Then it raises a question, why not Africa? Why is Africa left out? And then this leads to one question now, one argument, that if I'm told we don't have sovereignty fund in AU, then we'll always be left behind. That if I'm told France is still funding our AU, then on economic sovereignty, we are not there. And if I'm told UN Security Council have an issue or it has an impact on the economy of the world, then it is a time that we need to have a discussion on sovereignty of AU, funding AU. Then these are my suggestions now, because we look at it that African political leaders are not Pan-Africanists. They're just political leaders, but they lack Pan-Africanism in them. That we're having persons that are not politicians being more of Pan-Africanists than these political leaders, to the extent that AU is now lesser of a Pan-Africanist union than it should be. Now, these are my suggestions. One, that we start using the media to front the Pan-Africanist ideas. That today, if we have a very vibrant media, then this vibrant media will be able to defend the 1.4 billion persons' interest at the United Nations Security Council. And how do we get this done? That one, we so far have one media house that is fronting our ideas. In this case, we have Punchline African Television that is in a position to front the African ideas, the Pan-African ideas. Then let us make it vibrant. Let us use the media to be able to push our national assemblies to have a discussion on African ideas. Let us push the regional assemblies, like East African Regional Assembly, to start discussing the African ideas. But if we have our regional assemblies, our national assemblies, all our media houses not talking about Pan-Africanism, Pan-African idea, the need to have permanent members in the United Nations Security Council, then we lose it. Because I don't see why Europe as a country should have Russia, France, Wales, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Africa is still left out. We are a people, we have the resources, and these resources will only be felt. Our security will only be seen as important if we start going for these things, if we start demanding for them. And we only demand for them by looking at sovereignty fund. We need now to have, we need to pinch ourselves. We need to sit down and tell ourselves, let us fund the AU, then let us demand the AU to address our issues. But now that we lack African political leaders that are Pan-Africanists, then let us start by pushing our agendas through the media. Then we can't just do it aimlessly. Let's start doing it through the Punchline Africa Television. Let us make it more powerful. Then from it, we'll be able to push our national assemblies, our regional assemblies to start discussing about the Pan-African agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Wanda, you've made it. We've taken your points and your clips will come your way. So everything that we have said will be recorded and sent to you so that you can see how you performed on this show. This is Matsanga Africa Perspective, Nazi Omar. You are landing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matsanga. My landing points, do we need a permanent position? Yes, we do as Africans. It's about time we're on that table and making decisions that affect us. But what do we need before that? We cannot put the car before the horse, as they say it. We have it's impossible. So back to our leaders in Africa. We need leaders who have the best interests for the people. Leaders like, as you were mentioning, a lot of them, like Haile Selassie and Nkrumah, Gamal Nasser, and so on and so forth, and many more that you've mentioned. Those people had the best interest of the Africans, the African nation. But the leaders today are comfortable, mind you, where they are and their seats. So us as Africans and all the panelists here, what do we do? How do we get this done? I think Africa needs to wake up from the slumberland that we're in. We need to wake up from our slumber and realize that we have to do this, probably in a form of the something like the Arab Spring, but then we have to make sure that to remain internally vigilant, because forces of reaction are very persistent. So that is what Africa needs to do. So we cannot put the car before the horse. And for us to get there, and this is what we need to do, we need to advocate the African Union to actually work for us as Africans. And I think the only way is for us to get out of our slumberland and do that. That said and done, somebody mentioned us funding the AU, but yes, we can do that. But then when I think there's an African leader who donated some money, $1 million to the African Union, while there are people who are living below poverty line in his own country, and this is an African leader. And the AU accepted $1 million from this leader. So things like that cannot happen, but I think we're getting there. We need to have more discussions. We need to wake up from our slumber before we can aim for that seat. But yes, that seat is rightfully, we should claim it, we should have it. And we should detect African solutions for Africans. Africans have to come with their own solutions. There is no anything that is tailor-made for us. And what is democracy for Africa? We need to ask this hard questions. We have to look internally for our own solutions and what fits us best. What is the kind of governance that Africa needs? What is the kind of leaders do we need? What kind of democracy is suited for Africa? These are the kind of questions we need to bang on the table of AUs before we can say we have rightfully earned our place on the higher table. But I yell my mic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for yielding your mic. I have seen Professor Dr. Abdul Fattah. Professor, you have just landed in. Can I give you a few minutes to give us, we are on the tail end of solutions, Professor. I don't want to miss your point, or you came in to listen. Also tell us, Dr. Abdul Fattah Hassan Yusuf. Thank you. Tony, you have your 2 minutes from Tanzania. Tony from Tanzania, United Republic of Tanzania. Asante sana ndugu yangu, uko na dakika 2.
Ndio.
Yes.
Asante. I ask, where is Africa going? The truth is, we are divided in our development philosophy. We are divided in our perspectives. And as our colleague from Nigeria said, we have been divided by power hegemons. The powers that be make sure we continue to be divided so that they can exploit us. I think we need to do an inventory of our strengths and weak areas and learn from successes of countries. Africa has enough resolutions in our regional bodies, also in our continental body, the AU. We need to move from resolution to action. We have enough resolutions. We have to move from proclamations to promulgation to action. I think Punchline is the right forum to lead the dialogue. Lead the dialogue to bring Africa to discuss what can be done. Maybe the celebration of the 20 years of AU is a good opportunity to make these points. Perhaps Punchline can bring selected African leaders. I would have liked to say bring all African leaders, but we know we may not have the opportunity or the reason or the benefit to have too many. Let's bring selected African leaders to this forum to share their ideas and maybe pit them against forum members who can question them and hammer on the points that will be raised. But Africa was great. You remember Egypt had civilization long before Christ and the prophets that we hear, Muhammad and Moses. There are many discoveries that were in Africa in the old days. You know, Africa had a university in Timbuktu, I don't know, 700 years ago. Where I come from, we were smelting iron and making tools before the colonial powers came. So Africa can go back to that greatness, but we need to harness the powers of Africa. We need to harness the resources of Africa to a greater good for Africa. Let us keep a dialogue going. I yield the mic.
Thank you. All right, Samuel Tawish.
There is something missing in Africa, which is found in Tanzania. Where you come from in Tanzania, you have unity of purpose. People are united. They don't talk about tribes. Don't you think that there is this ethnicity tags that end up flowing in UN, that end up going to New York, because we come from backgrounds of different countries. We have carried that ethnicity tag. The current leaders of this planet at the moment have that ethnicity, that when they reach New York, they don't speak as Africans. Like Nyerere used to speak, the late Nyerere, the late Nkwama Nkrumah, Obote, Kaunda, Gabon Nasser, Haile Selassie, Kabra, Sekou Toure, all these leaders, Benabera, those Baba Tafa Balewa of Nigeria, those are leaders who used to speak with one voice. Patrice Lumumba, look at Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. All those used to speak with one voice when they reach a forum. Do our African leaders speak in one voice? Just an answer for me.
Absolutely not. And if they did, we would not be in the situation that we are in now. And we would not be where we are today as Africa. If we had leaders who had that vision for Africa, who had that one voice. Look at when those other leaders are meeting, whether it's the whatever summit that Africa goes to, whether it's the EU summit, Africa EU summit, they speak as as a bloc, but Africa, do they do that? For me, okay, let me even not say as a bloc should Africa speak, but can they speak as regions? The nation can.
Nancy, thank you very much. We have picked your point. I wanted Tony to just, there's one thing, is that, and the media, don't forget to ask this. Is there anybody in Africa who remembers Gaddafi? How many people? I do, but how many people, African heads of state, have put a day there for Gaddafi? He used to give us everything. Tony, and a block, and a mute.
Yes.
Unmute your mic.
Yes.
I was one of the people who wrote positive things about Gaddafi when I was with the Daily News. And some of the things I highlighted was the fact that Gaddafi was funding the AU. We were not getting money from outside, rather it was money coming from inside. There are African countries which have the capacity to co-fund the AU so that we don't need money coming from outside. Gaddafi was doing that. Number two, Gaddafi was rooting for Africa to have its own currency. And people thought maybe he was crazy. Gaddafi did a lot of things for his people. Education was high, health services were high. He was supporting Africa to have a Pan-African news agency.
Yes.
And there was a reason why he was killed. Let's be honest. The world could not afford a currency capital in Africa. If we came up with our own currency, it would be against the euro and against the dollar. Number two, having power to talk about Africa as Africans, which he was always talking about African Union, one African government. Nobody else wants to think about, everybody wants to be president. We have 56 presidents and they don't represent the interests of 1 billion people. So Gaddafi, he died, he was killed, Gaddafi went, and Gaddafi has been forgotten. Even if we didn't like him as a person, as a leader, he advocated for issues relating to Africa in a way many of our leaders are not ready to put their hands out there.
But my brother, if I can come in and ask you, why didn't we not like him? Is it because the Western world told us that he's a dictator, he is this, he is that, and all those ugly things are being implanted? They give us the reflection of what they want us to see in our leaders. The ones who were good leaders are the ones who they would tell you are the nastiest leaders. But the ones who are dancing to their tune would never be pointed at. This is the problem that we have in Africa. All our good leaders, all our strong men in Africa are gone. I would come back again and say this. We've not seen a government in Somalia after Siad Barre, but Siad Barre was told he's a dictator.
Dictator.
Exactly. Siad Barre allowed the Somalis. Siad Barre, whatever his downfall was, but he was still a good leader. He gave name to Somalia. At one point, Somalia was known when liberating Africans from colonialism. Somalia was known as the Lion of Africa. But where is Somalia today? 30 years down the line, we still do not have a government. We have been brought in something that we don't know what it is, that we are told we are,
Okay, Nazir, I'm bringing that topic next week. It is going to be hot. Is Somalia a state? A pariah state? Or it is not? Is it Africa? Or it is not in Africa? Because there are states in Africa which look at the Gulf state more than they look down here. I'm about to bring that. It will be very interesting, Miriam, that next week. Because Egypt does not look at us as we're together. Morocco does not look at us Africans as we Africans. You know, we have to be face reality.
Realistic.
Yes, also Ajao will agree with me.
Yeah,
that when you are playing football in Tunisia, they ask you which type of team do you love. But then there is a problem amongst we Africans. Myself, I would like to support Liverpool. But if you ask me about the local team in my country, I don't know. Yes, at least for me, I know my local team up to now. I send there $5, $10 to keep them going with buying one pair of socks. But how many Africans, they want to watch Manchester United more than Taifa Stars in Tanzania? Yes, if Taifa Stars is playing, nobody wants to watch the match. But you find grown-up African guys driving their car very fast. In fact, they can kill you on the road. They are going to the bar where there is a big screen and they are cheering Manchester United. What went wrong with us?
Dr. Matsanga, allow me to conclude by saying they have sold us a version of democracy that is Western and wrong for us. Democracy for them is a freedom to riot, to go on the street and make chaos and destroy things. And so, when you have a strong leader, they term that strong leader a dictator, like it was for Magufuli. Magufuli was seen as a dictator. Gaddafi was seen as a dictator. But those kind of leaders do very nice things for their people. They may not agree with everything everybody wants, and they may not allow everybody to express themselves, but they serve the majority of the people very well. This notion of democracy fitting one shoe, that is the Western shoe, we should also fight against. I yield the mic.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to Nazir. You are finished. Dr. Severin Alute. Just a few comments. You have been listening. Then Paul. Then we come to our professor of westernized democracy.
Yes, I have a few lines. One, first of all, we need to reform the whole thing if we want to go to 21st century. Why we need a reform? Because at a time when the Security Council was formed, we were not there. So it's our rightful ask for a seat, but before we have that seat, we need to reform. And before we go to reform, we need also to sort our house, to put our house in order. And we have our agenda. Our agenda needs to be very clear what we want and why we want it. Yeah. So that is one. And I support the motion, and I support that the African leader of today, maybe they were not there during the colonial time. That's why they don't feel that like our previous leader, that they had that passion for Africa. They fought for the independence, but later on things changed. But we needed to go back to drawing line to put things in order and to move forward. Otherwise, if we are not doing that, we'll continue fighting against each other. We don't have a common agenda. Every country will be running or siding with the European countries or other countries that they are beneficial to them. And at the end of the day, the African Union that we are having will be that just a group of few individuals that they are benefiting there, but we don't having an agenda for African. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sereven Alute.
Yes, sir.
Tanzania has been very peaceful for many years. What's the magic?
I think the way it was oriented and the design and the colonial design, there is a root on
and
that.
You have so many tribes, by the way.
Yes, we have more than 100.
You have very many tribes.
Yes.
But you are united, you go out in a united format, you change leadership without any hassle, no bloodshed. But so before we go for this Security Council, why don't we give it to a quieter place that changes leadership without problem? Instead of going for hegemonic.
That would be Kenya.
Yes, okay, fine. Kenya and Tanzania can hegemonic. Instead of going for my friend hegemonic.
Hegemonic.
Yes.
I think the secret ingredient is fighting corruption. I think corruption has a ripple effect in Africa and in individual countries more than the internal war that we are fighting within ourselves.
Right.
And as long as
Omar, that was Alute's question. I'm sorry. Because we need to wind up also.
Alute, if you are not sharp, Omar will take the points for you.
As long as she's making good points, there is no problem.
You see, Dr. Alute can yield some points to Omar.
Yes. What I see was the way things were done previously. One speaker mentioned that they were divide and rule. The way Tanzania was divided is quite different with other countries in Africa, for instance. So the way Tanzania was divided was in line with the ethnicity, but it was not massive like in other countries. And after the independence, what happened? I think there were kind of dismantle programs that were taken by the first government to dismantle that division. I think that is why we are today as we are, and we did not promote the ethnicity line of doing business. We had one language to communicate. We had one programs for the development, which did not favor a certain part of the country. The development were all over the country. So that one, I think, helped us to be where we are today. So, and the other country did not do that because maybe they went aligning with what they inherited from their colonial masters. And that's the reason that you see things are not happening. Some of the countries, they still going on with the line of administration, the way it was handled by the colonizer. I think that is, for us, that was a good, and also it was like 15 or 20 years program, dismantling chiefdom, dismantling that ethnicity powerhouse that the colonizer left us.
Can I give you the answer in 1, 2, 3, 4 words?
Yes, go ahead.
So you have a social contract.
Yeah, and we respect it.
Thank you very much. Social contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started very well on the question of social contract. Ujamaa villages. It taught people who they are. Hutu, Ubuntu, Hutu. Mtu anakuwa na Hutu, social contract. If you don't have that social contract, then you cannot build a society. Chinese eat once in a day. I and Nazir Omar, we want breakfast, 10 o'clock tea, lunch, 4 o'clock tea. Nazir, are you hearing me? My sister, we want...
Yes, I can absolutely hear you, yeah.
And then we finally sit down at around, even we harass our partners, our wives that, where is the dinner? But the Chinese wives and our husbands, some, husbands cook, we harass. But Chinese have one meal, Miriam, and that's it. And they eat it together on the table so that nobody swallows bigger portion. It is arranged. I've watched them, and they don't have plates like I needed to go and buy it. Each year you have to change the type of plates that have arrived, in the market. So that is social contract. Africa, until Africa has a social contract, we have a problem. Tawish, where is he gone? He should prepare for closing remarks, Miriam, yourself. And we now move to Paul, your 2 minutes. Then lastly, Professor Dr. Ajao. Paul, make your landing remarks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great conversation. I think with respect to the question itself, Africa represents a sixth of the population of the world, over a third of the number of countries in the world, probably more than 50% of the land mass of the world, and certainly more than 50% of the natural resources of the world. And I think that last point is the key to the problem, which is persistent, which is the UN represents a system which was set up a long time ago, which continues to maintain itself to exploit Africa and Africans. And I think from a practical perspective, we need to say we reject the principles and concept of the United Nations. Perhaps we need to, being practical, we need to reform it, but we would certainly, as Pan-Africanists, we reject the principles and concepts embedded therein, and also the institutions and the individuals who propagate and protect it. Equally, the second thing I would say in terms of practical action is that we should understand that the mainstream media is an instrument of that system, and it's always designed to protect and promote the interests of that exploitative system. And it's almost always, whatever the narrative is, it's almost always 180 degrees against the actual narrative of the people on the ground. The other practical thing I would say is that clearly we've identified a number of issues that need resolution, whether it's what is authentic African governance. Democracy in the West is actually a thinly veiled effort to promote corporate interests and vested interests and to protect them. And I don't think that's the kind of democracy, if any, that we want in Africa. David, you talked fluently about the kind of social contract that we need in Africa. We need to spend time developing that. As far as the economy is concerned, we are currently in Africa subject to the design of the economies are designed by the exploitative interests, which impose the structures on us, and we need to figure out what an authentic African enterprise environment looks like. Trade within Africa, invest in Africa, add value in Africa, only export added value goods outside of Africa, and other topics around the economy. The point about the media and the narrative, we need to take control of that. Africans need to amplify and project their own voice. We also need practically to build a constituency who shares this Pan-Africanist mentality, because it will cut across imperial concepts of geography, it will cut across imperial concepts of politics. We need to recreate something or create something which is genuinely, authentically and sincerely African in terms of mentality and consciousness, and then use that practically to build a consensus across a wide number of people in Africa, across all the geographies, who agree with the objectives of the movement. And by that, we then create unity of purpose, and hopefully, therefore, we can make practical progress to prosperity and sovereignty. And then my that's where I sort of end in terms of my wrap up. I'd just like to appeal. I know many of us, I know many people on this call already, but not everyone. And David, if we could figure out a way of connecting people who aren't connected, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. very much. We shall try to connect as many as possible, especially you don't miss. I know you follow me and I follow you, but please don't miss any of these good Matsanga Africa Perspective programs. They are always here. They have been educative. You'll have your tape sent to you, and you see what contribution you made. Next is who else was coming in? A medium?
I think Olosoji. I don't think he
Olosoji.
made his final remark.
Dr. Ajao. Dr. Ajao, Olosoji Ajao.
It's not there.
Oh, he's not there. Okay. Alicia, thank you very much for listening. Wanda, your hand is still up. What is the problem? We have moderated so well until Tawish accused us.
Yeah, I think we're good.
I think we are done.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And I will make my final submission just in 2 minutes. From this discussion, therefore, to this morning, up to this afternoon now, we want to take this opportunity to say there is something that lacks in Africa. And what is lacking in African context is advocacy, campaign advocacy, and activism towards the goals we want to achieve. As Dr. Jao has said, instead of just being activists, and instead of being only academic, time has come to become lobbyists, advocates for these goals. For example, if you ask how many leaders in Africa have alerted us, have asked their nationals what they should present in the UN General Assembly. If you ask anybody here on this platform whether Miriam knows what is going to be said at the United Nations General Assembly, Miriam, you won't know. But leaders have gone, have they alerted the entire Africa and said, this time all African leaders should sit in the African caucus when they reach New York and decide that we are not going to speak, many of us, with speeches. We just want one man to read our memorandum and tell the United Nations, you have disturbed that for 77 years. Now we want 2 seats or a seat or 3 seats, slots on the Security Council. The United Nations Security Council, there are 4 elements that disturb Africa. Can I mention them? Miriam, with your permission, 4 elements that kill Africa and that will make us never, even on this panel now, if you don't agree with them, then you will say, I did not go to school, but I have tried. Element number 1 that disturbs Africa is democracy. We don't know what it is. Followed by element number 2, elections. One produces the other. People think that so many elections make a lot of democracy. No. Element number 3 is United Nations Security Council. It's one of the most disturbing issues on the continent of Africa. Why do I say so? Anytime, if they want you, they will ban you. They will put embargo on you. If they don't want you to buy anything, deliver any food to any country, they will put sanctions on you. If they find you dealing with this one, they will tell you, we don't want you to deal with Russia. And then we want you to deal with Ukraine. Do you see that isn't it destabilizing Africa? For example, recently, the question of Ukraine and Russia, we are told that if countries in Africa were found, one guy brought something very interesting here, and that is Ajao. Ajao brought something very interesting. Ajao brought something to say the chairman of African Union was found in Ukraine laughing, but he has never traveled to Tigray. In the capital city, Baleki, yes. Bekele. He has never been to Bekele to see the plight of the people dying in Ethiopia. But he was seen smiling in the bunker in Ukraine, saying he is going to look for food for Africa. But there are people suffering up here in Ethiopia. So United Nations Security Council also blocks Africa, divides Africa, until we get a slot. We are not. The last factor that destroys our continent, therefore, as I summarize and I thank all of you, is corruption. Corruption meted on Africa by darker forces that don't want us to unite, and by ourselves who ask for this corruption. If there is a tender from Africa outside, you will ask for 10%. And that 10% goes to your pocket. But the company giving you the 10% will tell you, we want your oil. So who is worse? Is it you or the company buying? Because that one is in business. Corruption kills Africa. That's why you see all of us start moving towards United Nations divided. Even today, now, right now, Ajao has told us you need to be westernized before you arrive in New York. So if you propose Kenya, people will say, no, Kenya is not westernized. If you propose Egypt, you say, no, Egypt is too close to the Gulf states. Israel will lobby some people. I am on the right track. Israel will lobby someone for Egypt not to be given the slot. Do you know that? So corruption comes from outside. It corrupts institutions, it corrupts heads of state. I saw it during the selection of African Union head chairperson in 2016, when we were in AU, Amina Mohammed versus Mahamat Faki. That is the time when I saw Africa in the worst format of it. The worst format of Africa, where English-speaking countries united against French-speaking countries, where ECOWAS united with French-speaking countries, and the English-speaking countries in ECOWAS went and united with the French to select Mahamat Faki because he's from Chad. Nigeria was one of the countries that actually fought so hard for Mr. Mahamat Faki to become the chairperson of African Union. And it has killed African Union. It is not functioning. It is a walking corpse. As it walks, it is on paper. It can't ask for even a resolution. It can't ask for a slot. It can't enforce an ICC ban that no African head of state should be airlifted and tried in The Hague, except try them on the continent of Africa. The late Mugabe gave $1 million check. I was there. I was in the conference. Tears came down when a country, a man without money, his country was in a painful state, gave out money for the sake of African Union. Uhuru Kenyatta in 2017, gave a check of $1 million for setting up of African Union, African Court of Justice and Human Rights. If you ask about that money, you might not get it anywhere. I close and land by thanking all of you that this show, and thanking Punchline and thanking Miriam, as I hand over the mic to Miriam to say a few words before we conclude, because you are the main headquarters, you are on the steering, Madam. I would like to ask you to pass a vote of thanks to our guests this afternoon, please.
All right. Sorry. Thank you so much for those who took their time to join us in this very important conversation. I think we must keep talking until we see change and change the narrative and just spearhead it from here in the continent. That is how we are able to present the facts about this continent as they should. All right, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Olusoji Ajao, Wanda Wesonga, Timothy Lempayai. I think he came in and left earlier. Saxon also from Zimbabwe, and Severin Alute, Naz Omar from from London, Karatizo Ra, Samuel Tawish, we had Tony, we had Paul, and everybody else who took their time to join us today and making this show a success. Thank you, and thank you so much for watching.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Robert Mugabe.
While the world has drastically changed since 1945, the United Nations and indeed the global governance architecture remains mired in a long bygone era. This archaic hierarchy among nations threatens to erode the confidence and support that the United Nations commands among the majority, but disadvantaged of its membership. We are disappointed that we have lost the opportunity of this anniversary to address this burning issue of the reform of the United Nations Security Council in a manner that satisfies the just demands and expectations of the majority among us. I wish to reiterate our strong attachment to Africa's common position on the reform of the Security Council contained in the Ezulwini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration. I call on all genuine friends of Africa and all those who value justice, fairness, and democracy to support Africa's just and reasonable proposals. Mr. President, we equally call for the revitalization of the General Assembly, the sole universally representative and democratic organ of the United Nations, so that it can effectively carry out its charter mandated responsibilities. Accordingly, we fully support the call for inclusivity and transparency in selecting our organization's Secretary General by ensuring that the General Assembly plays a more significant role in that process. After all, the Secretary General is at the service of all the member states and not only that of an exclusive, privileged few. Mr. President, respecting and upholding human rights is the obligation of all states and is enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Nowhere does the Charter arrogate the right to some to sit in judgment over others in carrying out this universal obligation. In that regard, we reject the politicization of this important issue and the application of double standards to victimize those who dare think and act independently of the self-anointed prefects of our time.
Mr. President, there is so much more to share about Liberia's post-conflict transformation, how we have empowered ordinary citizens and a shared sense of citizenship, giving women, including market and rural women, a voice and the right to be heard. We have continued to transfer the healthcare and educational system, engender the entrepreneurial spirit in our youth, in our vibrant media and civil society. We are establishing trans-border development corridors to enhance regional trade and strengthening the rule of law to tackle systemic undermining of integrity. Liberia is experiencing the birth of a post-conflict artistic community in song, hip-hop, painting, poetry, storytelling, and fashion. Liberia has come a long way. We could not have accomplished all of this without the world body, its political leadership, the generosity of its economic development support, humanitarian contributions, and most importantly, the stabilization and security provided to our country through the United Nations mission in Liberia, UNMIL. I applaud you, Mr. President, your predecessors, the member nations and UN civil servants around the world who have sacrificed for us to see the very first generation of school-age children growing up in an environment of peace, free of violence, of civil conflict. Liberia's transformation was powered by a world community that made a shared commitment to deliver peace to a country and a sub-region beset by civil conflict and cross-border destabilization. The UN and its partner nations were of one mind, and from that global unity, a new Liberian democratic state was born.
I have always wondered why the elites in the different countries of the world do not see this. Who would lose if all the people on the globe led a decent life of having 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day for an adult person? Who would lose if all the people each day were getting enough calories to support their bodies? Who would lose if all the immunizable diseases that afflict people were immunized against? Who would lose if that one was achieved for all the people in the world that need immunization? For all the immunizable diseases got it. What would be the problem? Who would lose if all young people, children, accessed education to achieve literacy, numeracy, and skills as a minimum? Who would lose if all the human beings had a health unit within the radius of 5 kilometers from where one lives? Who would live if all human beings had access to clean electricity, away from charcoal, firewood, and dirty kerosene. Who would lose if every adult person, had a well-paying job? Who would lose if every family on the globe had a three-bedroom decent house for each family? My approach today is just to pose questions. I will not answer all of them, but I will just pose them to you so that you answer them yourselves. We always strive not to allow actors, foreign or local, to divide the African peoples, regardless of the complications involved.
We are still to come to terms with what the role of our organization should be. Should it just be a club of nation states that exists to look out to their own interests? What of its constitution, by we the peoples, as declared in its founding document? Does the theme we have chosen for this assembly have any relevance in real life? And do we want to make the United Nations relevant to all people? Do we want an organization that ensures shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies? Or should it remain the place to pass resolutions that are ignored with impunity? Madam President, when some of the nations of the world gathered in San Francisco 73 years ago and signed the landmark document that created this organization, it was a very different world from what we have today. And I do not refer only to the difference in the numbers in the room on that occasion, nor the difference in the mode of travel that brought the leaders to that meeting and the jet planes that have brought all of us to New York this week. Nor do I refer to the tweets by which we communicate now and the elegant handwriting that they employed back in 1945. I refer to the theme we've drawn up for this General Assembly and wonder if it would have been comprehensible to that group in San Francisco. It is a different world we currently live in, and we should accept that this organization must change to suit contemporary needs. Madam President, 10 years ago, as the General Assembly was starting its proceedings, the world was plunged into a financial crisis. The first scenes of that crisis were played out on the street not far from where we are gathered, but the consequences were felt and are still being felt around the world and in small countries like Ghana. Some say that upheaval lies at the heart of the change in politics and outlook around the world. Today, as we speak, a trade war is being stoked between the two largest economies of the world. The consequences will affect those who have had no say, including small countries like Ghana. These events provide proof, if some were needed, that ours is an interdependent world. We in Ghana and other parts of the African continent are determined to pull our country out of poverty and into prosperity. We do not think that a nation needs to remain poor or become poor for others to become prosperous.
The pursuit of the UN's mission for peace, development, human rights also remains as relevant today as it was in 1945 when it was adopted in response to the horrific experiences and destructions during that gloomy era. Amid the complex multilateral challenges that continue to confront us globally, no country can strive or solve all its challenges in isolation. Our salvation as human beings lies in strengthening our multilateral institution and fostering greater institutional cooperation to collectively address global challenges. The UN uniquely provides the opportunity to achieve this goal. Madam President, it is apparent that in order to make real progress, effective global leadership is imperative. Thus, as leaders, we must all shoulder our responsibilities by all means.
Mr. President, Zambia applauds the leadership that the United Nations provides in tackling climate change, as was illustrated only a few days ago by the hosting of the Climate Action Summit. Climate change is frustrating efforts to raise the standard of living for the world's poor. Scientists have spoken, and we have seen with our own eyes the devastating impact that climate change has had on our environment. Early this year, 3 of Zambia's neighboring countries, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, were affected by cyclones. Not far away, half of Zambia experienced a severe drought, which has since resulted in low crop productivity and lower water levels for hydroelectricity generation. Thus, opposite climatic extremes are occurring within the same neighborhood. As a consequence, Zambia is now scaling up its efforts to diversify energy production. Other priorities include the increasing of the adaptive capacity to reduce vulnerability and building resilience against extreme weather events such as droughts and flooding. The impact of climate change requires global collaborative efforts and support for the mitigation and adaptation strategies. As a developing country, Zambia needs assistance to enhance her capacity in key areas such as scientific research, early warning, rapid response, and transfer of appropriate technologies to help cope with the negative impact of climate change. Mr. President, furthermore, scaling up global efforts in addressing climate change should invariably include the increased accessibility to financial support, particularly for countries with limited resources, to enable them make their fair contribution to this global effort, and also bear the general climatic change-induced cost burdens.